We're going to give it a minute or so to let some people flow in. So appreciate everybody jumping on tonight. Yeah, Cole and Tyler, you guys missed out, man. We had a Red Dawn live stream last week. It was a lot of fun.
It was ridiculous.
Old Comrade Brent0331 came out. Comrade Brzezinski came out and gave the brief on the current situation with the Chi-Coms and the Ruskies.
So everybody intimate then, and we need to get ready to head to the mountains in Colorado.
Yeah, it's been imminent since '84, I think.
We need Swayze back, though.
I know, right?
We still have Sheen. We can win it with Sheen.
If he's not coked up.
Tiger blood.
Yeah.
Somebody posted a comment today. They're like, Texas would not fold like that. I'm like, yeah, maybe like 20 years ago, man. But like half our state now is, communist from California and New York.
Austin's already folded.
Yeah. So
it's just going to get worse, too.
Oh, yeah, 100%.
Especially if you guys get Beto as governor.
I see the stickers already, Chad. They're on the bumpers.
All right, so we're at about 32. I'll give it about another 30 seconds or so, and then we'll start kicking this. We're almost there. What's going on? We got Raptor Zulu.
Mm-hmm.
Zach Tulos. What's up, buddy? Jacob Slana. Am I saying that right? Probably not. All right. We got about 30 folks, so we'll just go ahead and kick this. What I'll do is I'll introduce our topic for the night, and then after that, I'll go around the horn and introduce everybody. And, we got our Russian guy from with hate. Remember him, Doc? So, what's up, buddy? We're good. We're friends again. It's just hypothetical. So, anyways, so we got a new topic tonight. It's not Red Dawn. That was just a hypothetical situation. Our topic tonight, first, we're going to cover cold weather warfare training. All right. And we got two guest speakers on tonight, which I'm going to introduce here in a minute. And that's going to be the first half of the conversation tonight. Second half is we're going to talk about the Rittenhouse trial that just finished up last week. So kind of a hot button topic and issue in the United States right now. So we figured we'd kick that around for a while. So just going around the horn here. Get a second. We got Bruce. You guys watch my channel for any amount of time, you should know who this gentleman is. Bruce is my right-hand man here on the Brent0331 YouTube channel. He also has his own YouTube channel, Bruce at CampArmaments. Be sure to check him out. Bruce brings the civilian perspective to the chat. He's a armorer. He was a former aircraft mechanic. He's been to many tactical civilian shooting schools, and he's a big Second Amendment guy. And just a wealth of knowledge. Totally brings you can't do that, but totally brings the civilian perspective to the chat. Sometimes something we're all lacking as combat veterans here. So next guy we got is Cole Salmons. Cole Salmons is a U.S. Army infantry veteran. He's a green hat instructor at the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. He also runs his own training institute called S&S Training Solutions. I've put the website link to S&S in the description box. Make sure you guys check them out. One of the reasons we brought him on tonight is because Bruce and I went to one of his training courses last winter, called Winter Forge. And it was just a phenomenal training experience. And we brought them on tonight. And that's essentially the whole reason why we're talking about this tonight. So, Cole, welcome to the live cast, man. We're glad to have you on tonight.
Thanks for having me on, Brent.
Next gentleman we got is Tyler Jackson. Tyler is also a U.S. Army infantry veteran, and he's in part of the Light Fighter Studies Group. They co-train with the S&S Training Solutions during Winter Forge. They were there last year. Wealth of knowledge. He's also a black hat instructor at the One Shepherd Leadership Institute. And again, wealth of knowledge. He's outstanding training when we went down there last year. So we're glad to have him on this winter training evolution live stream.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, Brent.
Next, we got Chad. Chad's a good buddy of mine. He served in 1st LAR in 2003, Iraq invasion. And he was also in OIF 2 for Operation Phantom Fury in Fallujah, second Fallujah offensive. And then how Chad and I crossed paths is we served in the same rifle company, Bravo 123, in 2010 when we deployed together to Afghanistan and Helmand Province. So he's a good friend of mine, known him for many years, just a wealth of knowledge. He's he's working on getting his doctorate in military history. So glad to have him on the show. And last, we got the good doc, Dr. Christopher Larson. He's written many books on small unit leadership. He's a wealth of knowledge. He is one of the original founders of the One Shepherd Leadership Institute, going on 40 years strong. Always brings an expert, intelligent perspective to the conversation. And like always, we're glad to have him on the show. So that is our panel tonight, guys. So the first topic we're going to be kicking around, and again, we're going to talk about the Rittenhouse trial next. But the first thing we're going to talk about is cold weather training, specifically focusing on Winter Forge, hosted by S&S Training Solutions and the Light Fighter Studies Group, but just cold weather training in general. And what I'm going to do right now is I'm going to kick it over to Cole so that he can kick this off. What you got for us, man?
All right. Thanks for that great introduction, Brent. So what we're going to talk about tonight is the third annual Operation Winter Forge. It kind of was coming out of the ashes of an older organization, Operation Eastwind, that was a kind of divergent Red Dawn, multi-day force-on-force FTX that primarily did their 9-day training from late February to early March. So they garnered a lot of cold weather training there. We kind of noticed and were starving for some of that cold weather training ourselves. And, we sought out some of those great minds that had the experience and said, hey, we need to start doing force on force training during the winter because we can't just sit out these cold months because you can't just pick and choose when the enemy is going to be there fighting. So with that, we linked up with Tyler Jackson and started to shape Winter Forge 3 years ago. And the first one we did was just a show up 24-hour FTX and just see what happens. Well, we learned a lot that first year, and we also identified a lot of stuff that we need to do, like offer the first day individual and team skills on sustainment, what it takes to be out there and be successful, not just suffer through cold weather, but how to actually get out there and be successful. So year two, we delivered up that first day of training and then rolled into the 24-hour FTX after that. And that's what we're going to offer at this next Winter Forge coming up, which is Martin Luther King Day weekend, January 14th through the 17th in Ullman, Missouri, the typical home of Alpha Company One Shepherd.
Muted.
Yeah, I think Tyler, you're up. I think you're one of the primary instructors, right?
Yeah. So, yeah. Sorry, I didn't hear what the segue was. Okay, yeah. So my name is Tyler Jackson. I am I help run and organize Light Fighter Studies Group, and Cole approached me 3 years ago now about running a winter patrolling course, and so we used to do, and Chris remembers, we used to do a quick 24-hour simulation. Well, actually, it was like 12-hour pickup game in the winter that we called Operation Valhalla. And it was nominally for all of us guys who were staff and cadre in One Shepherd. And so, even before going in the Army, we would go and get our, winter overwhites or camis on, go out there and shoot at each other for a handful of hours, come back and have some good beers. And then it wasn't until after I went off into the Army that I really got the bulk of my winter patrolling experience. And as Cole mentioned, I did do a little bit of Eastwind, and most of the simulation itself focused on, is 9 days of patrolling. But we always had some type of rear area to go back into and rest and refit. And it wasn't really until I got into the U.S. Army Infantry that, now we're operating in the winter conditions. And, oh, by the way, you don't get to go back to tents every night. And so it wasn't until I got into specifically forward deployed to Estonia took their winter warfare course, and they threw us out there for 2 weeks straight. Hey, we're going to teach you how to live and survive the elements. And so once I got done with that, did my time in active duty, came back, served in the reserves, and then that's when Cole approached me and said, "Hey, let's start patrolling in the winter." As he mentioned, you don't always get to pick and choose when the fight's going to happen. And frankly speaking, here in the Midwest, we have about a quarter of the year that are cold weather conditions. If you look from November to February, that's a quarter of our training cycle that most folks don't train in. And so it goes into a dead period. And not only do those patrolling skills atrophy, but most people don't have those basic skills on how to sustain themselves in that environment. And so we saw a niche. We wanted to fill that niche, and we've been running it for the last 3 years now. So that's pretty much Light Fighter's contribution. We come in and help with the bulk of the instruction portion.
Yeah, okay, so I'll chime in and say, first off, that they did this right after I left for the East Coast, repositioned my family, and I'd only been begging them to do this. So, I went in my spice garden and I cried for a good 5 minutes. Yeah, no, this is fantastic stuff. Honestly, Tyler, what was your low point, your nightly lows in Estonia?
-25.
Okay, so that's what I thought. And my experience, same thing, you have Reforger in Germany, and we had Team Spirit in Korea, South Korea, and the nightly lows were right around -20, -25. Our daily highs were about -5. So this is called extreme cold weather. This is past the dry cold, because there's a wet cold weather, a dry cold weather, an extreme cold weather, and there's one other that I forget what they call it even. Like almost no one operates in this environment, but there is one even south of extreme cold weather. And so extreme cold weather training and exercises, I had been exposed to that in the Army, like Tyler, like the rest of us. I know Brent was up in Norway. And so, we wanted to bring that back to One Shepherd, but we ran into several hurdles. First off, it is expensive, and I really would like, just for anybody who's considering this, and you should, everyone should. It's just a fantastic training program, and I'm thrilled. I mean, absolutely thrilled that S&S and Light Fighter Studies has stood this up on the Martin Luther King weekend every January. Having said that, I do want them to detail a little bit of the expectations of gear, maybe not going into real deep, but what are you looking at in terms of field gear, your sustainment gear, your sleeping gear, as well as what are you looking for in terms of how many layers of your EQWEX uniform. I'd hope you give a little bit of detail about that, because that was one of our big hurdles in One Shepherd was, oh my gosh, if we're going to go out and do a 7-day semester, everybody has to be able to have this. That was later confirmed when our S3 operations officer departed One Shepherd, which is normal, and he left saying, look, I really want to stand this up. That was Alan Swayze, and he went off and worked with several other fine young men to stand up Op Eastwind for 8 years straight, I think starting in 2007 or 2008. He stood up this, and it was an 8-day simulation in the Midwest every March, and there was typically snow on the ground, okay? And if you know anything about Eastwind, dude, they had armored. The Warsaw Pact had armored vehicles, plural, not just Jeeps and trucks, plural armored vehicles. And the NATO Pact had plural armored vehicles. Yeah, they had American Deuce and a Halfs and Jeeps, but they had British FV-432s, a couple of them. They had a self-propelled 152 or 155 howitzer. I mean, it was just something to behold. They had aircraft coming and going. You have typically around 100 people out there in this simulation from all over the world. People flew in from South Korea and Germany and Saudi Arabia to come participate in this. And so I think there's a really proud tradition there that I think Cole Salmons picked up. He's picked up the torch now, he and S&S, and working closely with Light Fighter Studies Group. Guys, I can't speak loudly enough about this. Any praise I admonish on them is sincere. Can you guys touch in on what gear expectations you have for your customers?
Yeah, there's definitely a certain financial hurdle that you have to clear, and it's definitely not an event you're probably going to jump into. Your first year of force on force training, individual readiness training. If I can harken back to the video that you put out on your YouTube channel recently, Doc, what it takes to outfit yourself. It piles on even more, and that's a great reference for people to go seek out and check out. Is your YouTube channel there. But additionally, outside of the normal packing list, we require the ICWIX levels 1, 2, and 3. 5 and 6 is highly recommended, as well as 7. The full Equix sleep system, 4-piece. So, the old school woodland bag, black, green, the bivy cover, Gore-Tex, mittens, gaiters are recommended. There's a lot of stuff on there that's kind of recommended that'll get you by. You'll definitely be more comfortable with it. But, when we say, this is the minimum list, it is the minimum list that is going to keep you safe. So that's one thing we don't want to do is get people out and then create real cold weather injuries that people have to face and deal with in their everyday life. So, and then in addition to the individual stuff that you wear, now we've got an individual stove that you're going to be carrying, in addition to team and squad, tents, stoves, fuel, all kinds of stuff that you just don't normally have to account for when you come out to an event. Now, most of that stuff, especially the team stuff, S&S will provide. Light Fighter Studies Group provides a lot of it. But the individually worn additional requirements, that's stuff that you'll have to go out and purchase. So, S&S, we have the standard of multicam and woodland for our two different, opposing forces, Blue 4 woodland, Op 4 OCP. But we're not super strict on it, especially for the winter gear, because it is something that you're only going to use for those few months, and it takes a long time to acquire that, and it's cost heavy. So one thing that we've been kind of experimenting with is dyeing UCP level 5 and level 6, the Gore-Tex and the soft shell, and had some pretty good success for things that'll work in the winter. That'll save you probably at least half on what you're going to spend on if you went and bought a level 6 soft shell and multicam. It's going to be $150, $200, even $300 sometimes on eBay. Those things get bought up quick. So what we started doing was experimenting with the soft shell and dyeing it. And what we got was a really kind of light brown with a red hue color that's going to work real good in the winter Ozark woods down there in Ullman, Missouri. Sure, it's not the prettiest camouflage pattern ever, but you can buy a set of this soft shell and Gore-Tex for $100 each respectively versus $200, $300 for a set of surplus multicam Equix level stuff. So we're going to do some videos here in the next few weeks to actually go out in the woods now that the foliage has browned up and died, and get some effectiveness comparisons out there for that stuff. So we want to make sure that this stuff's affordable for everyone. But if you want to go out and get the Cadillac stuff, fine. But there are cheaper options out there. And I know we were talking before the live stream with Tyler there. Even the older generation stuff, as long as it's still serviceable, the old Woodland Gen 2 stuff, all that kind of stuff, still out there that you can get for a little bit cheaper than the OCP stuff. Tyler?
Yeah, I mean, I think you hit all the big gear equipment, and this is, I think, the departure point between temperate operations throughout the rest of the year and cold, which is now we start getting into squad level equipment. It's no longer, it's just your personal sustainment. Now it's team sustainment. And so most of that is offloaded off of the individual warrior. And now we've brought that in as organizational equipment. So we have our 5-man Arctic tents for the warriors that are going to come out. We've got 10-man Arctic tents. And we also have and this was kind of a big debate, how to pronounce the Von Rek, but it's Von Rek is the shelter system we use. All it is really, guys, is just USGI shelter halves. We make modified configurations for the shelter halves, and we teach the warriors how to pack everything in their rucksacks and move that with them. When you're in the service and you do some type of winter warfare course, nominally you're going to run into some other type of transportation and mobility issues, and so our traditional wheeled trucks don't work as well anymore. And so now we start getting into snowmobiles and sleds and all that stuff. And so really, it retools our warfighting requirements as far as equipment goes, and it largely pulls most of the responsibility off of the individual warrior and into that team and collective. So really, when our citizen warriors, when they come out to do these training, they're going to see a lot of collective team military equipment, and they're going to get to learn how to use that. They're going to get to learn how to set up the stoves, how to set up the tents, and how to do group rationing as well. So it's not just the equipment. Now we're talking about food supplements are going to change. And then our overall op tempo is going to change too. And I'm sure we'll talk about that here in a little bit, but the gear, the team equipment, the food rations, it all starts shifting. And it's not that it's somehow alien or different, but that our doctrine is set for temperate zones. It's set for woodland temperate zones. Unironically, in Germany, after the World War II, when we start redoing our doctrine, we start looking and going, well, here's the generic. Well, whether it's desert, whether it's jungle, whether it's mountain, whether it's cold weather, those are supplemental environmental factors. They're going to shift not only your equipment, but your TTPs and how you're going to use that equipment. And that's what this course is. We're going to teach those warriors how to use this equipment and sustain tactical patrolling operations.
If I can just jump in, because so Bruce and I, that was our first time going and doing Winter Forge. And if I can just correct you, Doc, I didn't go to Norway. That was actually less than went to Norway. I have gone up to Bridgeport, the Marine Corps' cold weather mountain warfare school. Chad and I have gone up to that multiple times, but we did summer packages, which is still cold, but it's nothing like the winter. I don't know if Chad's actually done a winter package. I'm sure he can enlighten us on this. But anyways, back to my original point. So Bruce and I had to put together gear to attend Winter Forge last year, and it surprisingly wasn't as expensive gear-wise as we thought it was going to be. Because when I started going on eBay and looking at all that surplus stuff, you got to remember, like Cole already hit on, guys don't train in the winter. They should be, but they don't. So you have all this massive amounts of high quality cold weather surplus gear out there on like eBay and surplus websites that are just a steal. I've got a brand new pair of these like Gore-Tex winter boots, the ones that you can put the inserts in. I got them for like $30 or $40, brand new, never been used. It was unbelievable. And that went for a lot of the other stuff that I had to pick up too, just high quality surplus stuff that if you were to go to REI or one of these civilian, and try to buy the civilian equivalent of that same piece of gear, it would be astronomically more expensive than it was. So, Bruce, what was your experience trying to get some of that gear, getting ready for that course?
Mute.
Sorry, guys. Yeah, I took, in some cases, a slightly different direction because I kind of supplemented some of the military gear with some civilian gear. One of the things I'm a big fan of are high wool content clothing. So I had a merino wool base layer to start out with, and I wear wool socks 24/7. I wear them at work every day, and that's something that I definitely brought along too. That's not necessarily a requirement. It's just sort of a supplement to maybe the kind of common recommended gear list. But in terms of the surplus material, yeah, it's absolutely out there. Some of it's a little bit harder to find than others. If you're looking for a specific color, then yeah, you may struggle with that. Or if you're kind of an odd size, you may struggle with that as well. But for most of us, if you take a little time to prepare, if you try to go out the week before and buy everything, you can probably plan on paying for it. But if you know you're going to go 6 months in advance and you shop smart, you'll certainly find some good deals out there on the surplus market. Like Brent said, eBay is a good place. There's a lot of sort of online Army Navy stores, if you will, that have that stuff in stock quite often. And also a really good source for anything that's current military or just generation prior military gear is like Facebook Marketplace. That basically puts you in touch with people in your area that are selling stuff. And all the time, wives are like, get this stuff out of my garage. Why is this in my sewing room? They've got boxes full of millet. You're never going to use that again. You're fat and retired. And then the guy has to put it up for sale and get it out. And he's just giving the stuff away because who in his neighborhood wants a bunch of surplus military gear? Well, you do. You might for this kind of event. So don't let the cost scare you. It could be expensive, but if you shop smart, you can get what you need at a very reasonable price.
Yeah, I definitely agree with that, especially the winter boots. I forgot how cheap those are because you're right. People just aren't going out and training. They just buy the stuff they need for the nice temperate months, and that's it. Especially the level 5. That's probably the most expensive piece gear, and it is just recommended. But to me, fielding it last year, it was a game changer because it was super soft. It didn't create the noise that the Gore-Tex wears, and sometimes we'll post the video and pictures afterwards, and we'll get beat up by other vets like, why are you wearing Gore-Tex? Like, well, we're out there for more than 12 hours, so and you want to stay dry predominantly. That's the number one enemy out there is getting wet. But you have all that great gear out there, and we're going to show you how to use it. It's one thing to go buy it all, and it's another thing entirely to go out and actually use it and see when you need to be taking the layers off, putting them on, and really getting some reps on it. But like again, level 5 soft shell, extremely recommended, and it just works so much better with the other layers, the level 1 and 2, and then you can wear that under the Gore-Tex because basically it takes the place of your normal uniform that you wear, every day. So, but yeah, a lot of that stuff is out there on the cheap. You just need to do some good digging for it. Again, eBay's a great resource for it.
What's your experiences, Chad? Did you ever do a winter package at Bridgeport? You're muted, man.
I was going to say my experience is probably just the same as yours when we went to Bridgeport together. I don't really have a whole lot to add to this. My experience is very limited. Training for Iraq and Afghanistan, it's a flat desert, so it's quite the opposite of what you guys are talking about. But from what I know from winter warfare, there are some tactical and operational considerations. Obviously it requires a different type of gear, more food, more water, more calories expended. Movement is often slower. There's no vegetation, weapons maintenance, and you got tracks in the snow if there is snow on the ground that you got to deal with. Operationally, logistics tends to move slower in winter warfare. So that's some things you got to consider. And if you have vehicles, and if it's extremely cold, sometimes those vehicles have to run. You got fuel considerations you have to worry about. So not a whole lot to contribute there, but just some general considerations.
Yeah, and I was just watching a series. I wish I could remember the name of it and who was putting it out, but it was a live update of what's going on in Ukraine, like the current situation. And they were going up to the Ukrainian soldiers on the front, and man, it was crazy because I remember going through the Winter Forge package and Tyler sharing a story about how the U.S. military has gotten rid of our TA-1 field phones and we don't use them anymore. And they were having to borrow our old TA-1 field phones from, the host country that they were in to operate because the radios weren't as effective because of the cold temperatures. And, I was watching this documentary with these Ukrainians and they were talking about how, the Russians are jamming all their radios and they can't even use them. So all their communication is done with old hardline field phones. And I remembered those two stories, and man, it was funny. There's so many considerations for cold weather that we're fixed and think in a certain way. Like military, hey, your rifle's never more than one arm away from you, right? And then you go up in these cold weather training packages, and you learn that no, you got to keep your weapon outside the hooch. Otherwise, when we get hit and you run outside from your nice warm heated tent into the freaking freezing Arctic temperatures, and then your weapon's inoperable. and you gotta separate those mindsets to facilitate some of these different tactics for these cold weather environments.
Yeah, I mean, operationally, so there's some really weird things going on. You think you've got it, you've like you said, you're in the temperate climates, you're in the desert, you're in the jungle. You think you understand it. There's consistency. For every 2 units on the line, 1 unit is held in reserve. Nope, flip that. This is Arctic. This doesn't follow those rules. For every 1 unit on the line, there are 2 in reserves, and they're at different states of readiness so that one can immediately react and the other one is genuinely getting rest. And so you have to rotate that. But I mean, you're right, just the electronics. Like, I remember our night vision had in Korea, because again, your night is 25 below zero, dude. You're standing in 2 feet of snow up in the mountains at 25 below zero. You had to have these wires that hung down past your ears and went to your chest, and this is where your batteries were kept. This is how you're powering the unit. Because if you put that in there, it's true that a battery will preserve its life in cold weather, but that's assuming you're not using it. Once you turn that thing on, it starts to die immediately. So you got to keep it warm inside your body. Where you carry your water in your battle rattle and where your parka goes and everything else, this is completely rethought. You're like, oh, well, let me just take a drink out of my hydration pack. That whole tube has been ice from just minutes of stepping into the environment. So you have to rethink everything. You rethink the size of your canteen lids. Seriously, metal canteens seem stupid to everyone until you have to throw a metal canteen into a fire to melt it, and get the water to water. So you just rethink all of your gear, but and the electronics in those radios, and holy crap, the hell it played on those. But I think one of the most fascinating thing is what it does to the weapon systems. We think of like you're going to the arboreal forest, right? And you're going to lay a near ambush in the evergreens. No, you aren't. And here's why. You've got to fire your weapon system in single shot mode, essentially, to heat up the system before you actually start getting rapid or cyclic fires out of it. Otherwise, you break the weapon. Like, you have to warm it up with gunfire to do this. I think the other thing that I really freaked out the first time I saw it was I did not know that firearms could make contrails, but I was a machine gunner in Korea. And so we're on a firing range and I let out a burst, and everywhere I shot, you could see contrails, which then the enemy could look at the contrails and go, no, he's over there. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? It's a wild, wild life. It's far more than just the cold that you're dealing with. But yeah. And of course, I'm going to say it again, guys. It's Winter Forge, S&S teaching that at the CMTC in Central Missouri. You need to get there because you cannot learn this by reading it. You got to go do it.
Yeah, I think the other big thing, Chris, you mentioned machine guns. We experienced this, and Brent, I don't know if you guys have the 240 Limas or if you guys still have the Bravos, but we got issued Limas. And so I'm a weapons squad leader at the time. We're doing an area defense, and this is in Estonia right after we got done with our winter training package. And the thing that we didn't do in the in the winter training package was sit out in the defense for 5 days and then start firing, right? And so we broke all the guide rails on the 240. I mean, that's because, hey, they're in our engagement area, they're moving, we initiate, and all of a sudden it just broke the machine guns. And when we got back to the armors in the rear, they were like, you didn't break the machine gun. No, we broke the machine gun. The guide rails are cracked, that type of stuff. And so you're absolutely right. The equipment's, I think the biggest, surprise to most guys, like you said, changing the canteen cup size lids, that type of stuff where you wear your equipment. But the other big thing, and this is more of I want to say, a 21st century problem. Now that thermals are prolific on the battle space, this is a big, big consideration. And one of the big things that we experienced in the infantry in Eastern Europe was NATO's hesitancy to have things like fires and tents because of thermal emissions. And so what we learned quickly from the Estonians was that, look, you don't forsake bivouacs. If you stay out here and you don't have tents to rotate your guys back into, they're going to freeze to death. And so what you do is you terrain mask, you consider heater times, those types of things. And there's all sorts of other little TTPs that we're going to talk about in the course for how to mask your thermal signature and how to scale your thermal signature. So just like everything else, there's risks involved with tactical operations. And as leaders, we have to say, I'm accepting this risk over here for this tactical gain. That's true in winter operations. I've heard guys, on the keyboard warriors, you never start a fire in the field. Bullshit. Or no, we always have a fire going, and there's never a time that you need to completely, go completely cold. Nope, that's also wrong too. So that's another thing that we address in the course is how do we scale our thermal signature? And there are multiple different ways to do that. But I think that's the big one for 2021. Everybody's worried about drones and thermals now, so we consider that.
Absolutely. Yep. I think probably one of the most important factors that we're overlooking here is we got to look cool. Step one, right? So you finally get the chance to break out the winter camis, the over whites, all that kind of stuff. So you can go out and take some cool pictures for 10, 15 minutes, but if you really want to get into an environment and learn how to sustain that, you got to come to a course like this. I mean, it was eye-opening for me, because, Tyler Jackson, he's the subject matter expert on it. That's why we're bringing him in and working with the LFSG guys. Just the sustainment of the individual and the team was eye-opening to me. I've never even anticipated anything like that. And then, just the individual clothing, like all the layers coming on, off all the time. And then managing, your guys, their morale. Because if you don't keep them going with good morale and have them ingesting warm fluids, not just warm water, but warm, tasty water, soups, bone broth, all that kind of stuff, they're going to just hole up in their sleep system, and you're not going to get them out of the tent to patrol for anything. Even if they're not, they're not hurt, they're just really uncomfortable, but it will defeat you before the enemy does if you let it. But if you know how to manage all of those tasks, you can go out there and be successful. So, Brent, Bruce, what was some of the things that were most eye-opening to you when you came out last year?
Go ahead, Bruce.
Okay. I think that Tyler touched on it a bit. Some of the thermal signature techniques that were developed and used to minimize those when you are running things like field stoves or open fires to ensure you, because you have to do that. It's so cold. You're rotating troops in and out for short periods of time, getting people warm. Leadership roles are so important of looking over all of those men below you and making sure that each one's taken care of. Everybody has a special need. This is particularly true for civilian volunteers, or say people that aren't maybe the best prepared, the best shape of their life, whatever the case may be. You've got to look after. You got to make sure that people aren't just shutting down, like Cole said, that they're on their medications, that their morale's good, that they're getting the hydration that they need, that they're changing their clothes the way that they need to, monitoring that core temperature, that they understand how to do that. They teach you all of this in this course. And that's you may in your mind say to yourself, yeah, it makes sense. I've watched a couple of YouTube videos on it. I think I could do it. That's very, very different from actually being out there with all of those environmental forces being pressed onto your body and then having to think that clearly. You will forget stuff that you knew and you will overlook it. And having a good team around you of good leadership reminding you, hey, why don't you do this way? Why don't you do that? And you're going, oh yeah, I knew that, but I didn't remember, for whatever reason, because of the forces that are on me, I didn't remember that when you're cold and miserable and in an environment you're not accustomed to. That's a really big deal. Having group tents to get into and be able to keep yourself warm. Weapons techniques that I had never learned that before, of storing your weapons outside to ensure that they maintain a constant temperature the whole time and that your optics are not having problems because they're being defrosted and refrosted and defrosted and refrosted in and out of the tent. That's new. That's not something that anyone ever trains on that's outside of a cold environment. I've never seen that before. So there's so many things, guys, that you can learn from one of these classes that even if you just want to challenge yourself physically, you think you're up to the task. Okay. Don't talk about it on the internet. Bring your stuff to the class and show us. Let's see how tough you are. It'll humble you real quick if you aren't truly prepared.
Yeah, the biggest takeaway I had, and Cole kind of already hit on this, but just, man, the whole like clothing management, you got to fight that temptation. I mean, this is something we do in the Marine Corps, but not at this level. It's freezing outside, and you got to step off, and it's like your instincts are telling you, no, I don't want to take this woolly pulley off or this marshmallow jacket. You got to be crazy. It's freezing outside, but you got to do it. I got to do it because, a quarter mile into your movement, you're like, fuck, it's hot. I wish I would have taken this thing off. And guess what? Sweat kills. And once you get wet, that shit ain't drying, and you're going to freeze your ass off. And then that's how guys get, injuries and end up getting evac. So that whole, like, actually putting into practice that clothing management, of constantly stripping down. And then once you stop and get where you're going, putting back on. And then you're getting ready to move again, it's coming back off. Right. And it's just a constant cycle, on, off. And, you can read about that or you can watch a video about that, but until you get out there and do it and actually experience it, it really doesn't set in.
Yeah, that exactly happened to me. You step off on that first patrol. It's cold outside. You're geared pretty heavy. And for me, at least, because I didn't have a lot of experience in it, my brain is telling me, man, there's snow on the ground. It's cold out there. And as soon as we stop, we take that first break at the beginning of that patrol, stuff's coming off because my body temperature is warmed up, and it's warmed up more than you expect because you're not just walking out in the cold, but you're carrying a weapon, ammunition, water. You've got a rucksack that you're not accustomed to, more clothing. That has to come off. And then if that mission changes, and all of a sudden you're not on patrol anymore and you decide to stop and set up somewhere for 2 hours, maybe in some type of observation post, you're going to want to start putting that stuff back on because you're going to start chilling down. It's a lot of maintenance dealing with the regulation of your body temperature when you're in an environment like that.
Yeah, no, I mean, I think that's absolutely right. You start to learn the difference. Seriously, you start to learn, convection, conduction, all the different ways of transferring heat from your body and radiation. That's the third one. And to the outside world, right? And so, a point here is we'll do near ambushes in most environments, and particularly in a jungle environment. We'd go into a near ambush 10 o'clock at night, and the sun would come up on us 6 o'clock the next morning. So we're doing an 8-hour ambush, a near ambush at night. You do that in broad daylight in those cold weather conditions, you can't lay on the ground longer than an hour or conduction. It'll just literally kill your troops. They'll freeze to death on the damn ground. You got about an hour. So completely changes the ball of wax, and you're learning things that you are not. There's no way you realize you're learning. Let me ask you this, Bruce and Brent, you went out there, and this is true for any of the others as well. So you get back after like 2 nights, 3 nights of this. Do your wives go when you lay down? And it's a real question. You lay down, and my wife, she goes, "Oh, get that," and she pushes me away. She's like, "I'm sweating just getting around you." What you don't realize, your body has learned to kick out greater BTUs. Why do you need more calories? And everybody says, well, I guess you're carrying heavier gear because you're carrying more of it. That's absolutely true. That's not it. Your body is trying to keep you warm that whole damn time, and it's learned to do that by its second night. Your first 24 hours are so damned uncomfortable, and after that, your body regulates, and those BTUs kick in. You come back to the real world, lay down to go to sleep by your wife, and she's like, "Could you go into the next room?" Everything's just hot and sweaty. So again, you have to get out and do that. And I answered my own question, but I saw guys smiling and nodding, so I assume we all had the same kind of experience. Yeah.
Well, I'm just amazed at, just being up at Winter Forge, and even when we had the snowpocalypse here in Texas, how just the human body adapts to that, real cold weather, right? By the end of Winter Forge, I mean, we're essentially running around in just regular BDUs, almost no warming layers whatsoever, because I feel like we adapted somewhat to that cold weather. And, I think back to going, one shepherd that first fall semester, at night when it gets down to like, low 50s, and you're like, coming from Texas, 80-degree weather, and then here we are at Winter Forge where it's significantly lower than that. And, over a period of time of being there, we get acclimatized to the area and are able to operate with less warming layers than when we first got there.
Yeah, that's particularly true. I saw a guy had posted from Alaska that said like anything above freezing is t-shirt weather. I get that. And your body changes and adapts so fast. There is a curve, but I just remember thinking after spending, a week in there, that if I could do that for a month, if I could stay out in the field and train with these guys and run that same procedure for a month, I would be a changed man, and in a good way. You're getting in better shape, but your body, you're breathing that fresh air. You're I don't know. There's just something about it. Maybe you're reverting back to being a caveman, almost like a dog reverting back to being a wolf. If you take any dog and you just let it run wild for a week, it's the happiest dog you ever had. And it's a filthy, nasty animal, but it's very happy being filthy and nasty. I was no different. And I'll tell you, man, every time I go to these training events, and particularly I think of the Winter Forge event, I was just like, man, struggling that first day, but things do start to get better, and they're just going to keep getting better. And pretty soon, what was a foreign environment to you is becomes the norm in a short period of time.
Yeah, the thing, Bruce, you're talking about, kind of reverting your caveman status, and Cole said something about, hey, our natural tendencies is to start, clamming up. The thing that I noticed, and is just being an NCO. In cold weather environments and managing troops, is my squad got the closest cohesion wise that we had ever gotten in a very short period because of our winter warfare training. The fact that we have to be watching out for each other constantly. We have to be in each other's business. We are constantly coming into warm tents and sitting shoulder to shoulder. We have to clean ourselves and get naked in front of each other in these tents. I mean, the list goes on of how definitely animalistic it becomes. And that's the only way you're going to make it. If you're going to do this for weeks to months in these types of environments, it very, very much matters your team. And that leadership aspect of keeping everybody motivated, that is for me was the most difficult. It was the personnel management of making sure that it was a constant battle to make sure they had enough liquids and enough food and the right type of rest, make sure they were moving. If we're sitting there on the defense, like getting guys up to go do security patrols to the rear, that type of thing. And then finally, it was that psychological aspect. Because, Chris, you mentioned, hey, night changes, day changes, the sun comes up and down. If you're in prolonged darkness for weeks on end, months on end, it starts affecting you. And so there's this massive psychological element that I don't think is talked about that often, especially if you're looking at some of the older fieldcraft stuff and the FMs. It's mentioned leadership, exercise, constant care of troops. But in between the lines, it's this psychological aspect. And there are all sorts of little TTPs that we do as leaders to try to extend that out so that we get the most out of our troops. And so to me, I see this pivot happening, right? Like those of us that are military just got out, we see this big shift happening back from, the global war on terror now onto, near peer, full kinetic. And we're going to be operating in these environments. And the one thing that I've seen is that it's not just the fieldcraft gap, but it's the leadership knowledge gap. That's going to be a big deal for our military, because those guys and gals that just came in, they don't have that experience yet. And that's not something you want to learn day of. There's a lot of things you can learn day of, but that environment is the toughest I ever operated in. And if I didn't have the training, knowledge, and skills ahead of time, we would have had way more cold weather injuries than we did. We got congratulated, our battalion commander, sergeant major come up after these big events. You guys did so great. You guys did so great. And, the question was, man, you only had a handful of cold weather casualties, minor stuff, chilblains, early stages of frostbite. And what they didn't see was, yeah, we had all of about 24 to 48 hours before shit would have got even worse with multiple people. There's just so long you can stay on a line, so long you can stay in contact without getting rotated out and managing your troops before it just fucking falls apart. And if you look at, Chad, you're getting your PhD in military history. If you look at the Italian campaign in World War I, you look at the Eastern campaign in World War I and World War II, the majority of casualties were from with weather injuries. People just die in their fucking foxholes.
Aleutian Islands.
So
Aleutian Islands in World War II, and of course Korea. Look at that. Just you had an incredible amount of casualties that were weather related.
Yeah. So the it's not just the equipment. Most of us in this circle, we would say knowledge over gear, right? Like that. We know that as being senior leaders, we know knowledge over gear. However, cold weather, there's some gear requirements you just can't skimp on. But in this case, I still think that's true. You got to have the knowledge to use the gear, and that's what these types of courses that's what they're designed for.
Yeah, hey, I'm glad you said that, Tyler, because that brings up a good point. The old saying, pack light, freeze at night, like that is not applicable in a cold weather environment. You can't do that shit. You die. You pack light, you die. And the chosen reservoir. I want to make sure that that's thrown in there.
Frozen chosen. I think there's a couple of good questions in the comments back in there that I wanted addressed and not ignore them. Thermal optics, we allow them out, but we don't have any for issue or rent at S&S. Limited night vision. Tyler, do you want to talk about the proper dry, wet cycles and maintenance there?
Are you talking about weapon systems specifically?
No, just the individual soldier.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So, I mean, and this is, I see some other comments about, hey, I live up in Alaska. I live over in Maine. I live over here. I live over there. So, Chris mentioned this earlier. There are different climates for cold weather, right? You've got your cold wet, which is where we're predominantly at. The majority of America is in cold wet conditions or temperate conditions. Then you have what's called hemiboreal or semi-boreal. And there's a very, very small subset of terrain in the world, but we do have it in the United States a little bit in Minnesota, Michigan, and specifically Maine. Maine has the majority of the hemiboreal forest, and that's what the Baltics, where I took my winter warfare course, was in the hemiboreal. And then you have the subarctic, and then you have the Arctic, and then what Chris was talking about, you have this little cap there on both the poles that are just extreme. So really, when we talk about gear, when we talk about TTPs, it matters. It matters what hemisphere and climate you're in. It matters what the weather conditions are doing. And this is why, when we talk about EQUIX layer, 4, layer 7, this is what we're talking about. This is a modular system that allows the soldiers and the leaders to change what they're wearing to climatize them based on their activity level. And so, there's a helpful chart. It's so specific that, even us senior leaders, we have charts. We go, okay, what conditions are out there right now? What's my activity level going to be? And I pre-plan this before I do patrols or combat operations. This is baked into my plan of when I'm going to change equipment. And so that warm thaw cycle, it's completely dependent on the weather. It's with us. It's with our equipment. Guys are mentioning things in the comment chats about the weapon systems. Yeah, it matters. When you're in the Arctic, pulling your weapon in and out, it matters. When you're in, around freezing here in Missouri, it doesn't matter as much. It's not that big of a deal. But if it starts dropping into the negative teens, then it matters. So it depends on the humidity. It depends on the climate. It depends on what the ambient temperature is. All these factors play into it. And so this is why it's difficult sometimes to discuss this, especially online with other people, because it's completely contextual. What's the context and what's the environment? What are your what are your equipment, and then what are your TTPs, and then what are you trying to achieve? Because clearly, if you're if you have
That's what I'm trying to achieve.
But she's clearly been on a long patrol and she needs to vent. Which, by the way, I mean, this is the other bonus for getting deployed to Eastern Europe. I'm just going to say. So, you know, if you guys are interested, join the Army. They'll send you to Ukraine and Estonia. So anyway, yeah. So I mean, I think that's the right answer. The right answer is you know, I'm going to have a cop out. It's Met TC, guys. I mean, you know what our thaw cycle, our warm cycle, it's Met TC.
Why don't you guys? I know that Tyler, you mentioned it, but Cole, any of you guys, why don't y'all go ahead and talk a little bit about the special requirements and systems you have in place for keeping weapons and optics functional in a cold weather environment like that? I thought that was very interesting. It wasn't something I've necessarily heard about, and I know there were some guys in the chat asking about it, so it might be something good to speak on.
Before you do that, Cole and Tyler, can I ask you, Bruce, why did you turn the lights off? I mean, I saw a sexy Soviet woman, and then suddenly your lights went off, and I want to know if we're supposed to read something into that.
No, you guys should completely ignore that, because you know it's. For me, it's like a race to the finish, and I always win. So, yeah, I don't need long. One of the things you guys learn out in the field, this isn't usually talked about, but you know, when you're around a whole bunch of dudes like that, your private time is extremely limited, and you can get very creative, particularly in extreme cold temperatures. Maybe some of these more experienced guys will speak to those techniques also. But first, let's talk about weapons maintenance and keeping those weapons running.
Yeah, absolutely. So, I mean, this is something that was, you know, alien to me and went against every fiber of, you know, private Salmons coming out of basic training. Everything that was ingrained in me was, you know, that rifle stays within arm's reach, one fall away. And with that, you can't take that rifle in and out of a hot tent and introduce it back into the cold. And it's going to fog your optic up. That's going to create condensation that can refreeze later in the action of the firearm. So I'll turn it over to Tyler and talk about the actual things that you create to keep those outside weapons guards and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, well, so Brent just put up on the comment chat here that you know, what's the best way to prepare for this? You know, from a civilian perspective, with all of the other constraints involved. I mean, I'm you know, obviously I'm going to plug our course. You know, come to the course, go get training. And Bruce talked about the knowledge aspect of what you learn by doing something. This is experiential knowledge. We have all other types of knowledge that we gain. You know, there's ways of knowing that there is a knowledge that you can't get unless you experience something. And it's true. It's hard to codify, but it's there. And so, you know, do the best you can. Hey, go on a hike, go to a national park, take your family winter camping in Colorado. You know, do something like that. If you got to blend these things together, there are ways in which you can learn a lot of these fieldcraft skills to keep yourself alive in the winter environment. And that's the big thing. The infantryman's adage is that the environment is the first enemy. That's just it. We are fighting nature first, and then we have to fight the bad guys. And it's not apparent when the weather's nice, because it's easy. But when this is here, when we're in the cold weather, it's very, very, very apparent that that's the first fight we have to do. Other weapons maintenance specifically, you know, look, it depends on the weather, specifically the temperature and the humidity and all that stuff, and what it's going to be throughout the day. You know, Chris asked us, hey, what were your lows at night? What were your highs? This matters too. Okay, so your thaw freeze cycle is actually the most important thing. If we're in Alaska and we're in the dead of winter, we're not really having a freeze thaw cycle naturally on the outside, right? The only freeze thaw cycle is going to be in the tent versus coming out. Okay, in some of the hemiboreal forests, you can have a near thaw cycle at the hottest part of the day. And then it will drop down into the extremes 15 below at night. So the guy that was over here on the chat was talking about Maine. Yeah, absolutely. That's it. And then this is what makes it interesting to talk about, because as you actually get closer to a temperate zone and into a temperate zone, some things, the things that are the most difficult to manage change, right? And so in Alaska, it's your freeze thaw cycle from your tent to outside. Down here in Missouri, it's trying to stay dry because we're in wet cold. And so if I'm in wet cold and it's, thawing and there's snow everywhere, I'm not going to leave my weapon outside. It's not cold enough for that weapon to get fucked up, and then I'm not going to be able to shoot. I'm going to bring it into the tent with me. But if it drops and it's consistently, in the negatives, that's when I'm going to consider, okay, what's my worst enemy? Is it going to be me not doing weapons maintenance and having it lubed up, or is it going to be this thaw cycle in which now my optics are going to get fucked up? The metal in my firearm is going to absorb the moisture. And then when it freezes, that's the issue. That's the real big issue there. And the optics are a big issue. And coming out of a hot tent into a cold environment with the optics, that's also an issue. But it's predominantly is, am I going to crack the firearm? Okay, the receiver, the internals, or am I going to have enough lubrication to make the firearm function? And so this is when we start getting into specialized lubricants. Law is the one that comes to mind, and there are other lubricants as well if you don't have law. But basically, at some point you have to make a determination of what your temperature range is to say, either I'm going to lubricate with something, a synthetic specialized lubricant, or I'm going to go dry. That's also an option as well in some cases where dry is actually better because of a freeze thaw cycle. So just like we have that chart with our 7-layer EQUIC systems, we're also considering those environmental factors when we're doing things like where are we going to place our weapon and when and where we do the weapons maintenance. So in some cases, we bring the weapon into the tent for brief periods of time, clean it, put it back outside. And other times we do the weapons maintenance outside the tent. So it's such a massive range of different techniques that are used based off of that range of environmental factors. This is what makes cold weather so complex, is it's not just, it's not just Alaska tundra. It's this range between temperate all the way up to Arctic. So I hope that kind of clarifies that freeze thaw cycle.
Hey guys, real quick, we're at an hour here, and we do still got to talk about the Rittenhouse thing. So I do want to try to start wrapping this up. Before we get to that, Cole, Tyler, if you guys can give details on the course, and then what should somebody that's coming out to Winter Forge for the very first time, what is their priorities? Like, what is the no shit, I have to have this in order to get to the course? What should be on their radar so that they can come to that course and train?
Let me say one thing first, guys, not to interrupt, but to key into this from the question that was posted before, which is, how do I explain this to my family? How do I do this? Guys, I understand that there's financial constraints. First of all, this is the course, because I don't know of many other places in the country that offer this course. So one, you're at the right place. Two, how do you convince your family? You probably don't have a military wife, i.e. a wife that was yours while you were in the military, or maybe you weren't in the military, because they're kind of geared for you leaving for periods of time, right? They'll probably be a little more understanding and just roll their eyes. Oh no, not this again. You're going to be gone for a week. But I'll tell you, if you don't have that, then plan a year in advance. Let them know, a family discussion at the dinner table. I'm going to do this, and this is happening. I'm doing it for us. If they don't understand, they don't understand. If they do, great. You got a good supportive family, and budget yourself. Maybe $100 a month, if that's all you can budget. And every month you spend that $100, and you let them know, hey, I'm spending $100 a month. However I come up with that money, I'll come up with that money, but I'm going to spend $100 a month, and I'm going to buy the gear and equipment that I need to subsidize the stuff you should already have to go to this class. Now, this isn't a beginner's course. We're kind of expecting that you've got the basics down already, and that you're just going to add the cold weather stuff to it, and make it part of the discussion on a weekly basis at home. Hey, don't forget I'm doing this. Don't forget I'm doing this. And by the time that year comes around, you've got that week blocked off. You've got your gear has come together, and they're already geared and they're mentally prepared that you're going to be gone for that week to do that. And I think that, and once you make that first step, well, you just open the door. You can continue to build on that and do a class a year, or a class or 2 classes a year, and keep your experience up. But you have to get your family involved. You got to let them know what's going on and get them on your side, because you don't want that angry woman at home.
Yeah, very good points. And I'm really glad that you brought up, it's not a beginner's course. We're not teaching you how to IMT. We're not teaching you how to do an ambush. It's expected that you already have that core knowledge. You don't have to be, light fighter tab from one shepherd, but you at least need a couple semesters, a couple events with us, or some light infantry experience on your own before you come out, because it's not the place to learn that. It's a place to enhance those skills with being able to apply them to the cold weather environment of your choice. So I'm really glad that you brought that up. As far as like, no shit, what gear do you have to have before you come out? Probably number one, the intermediate cold weather boots with the liners. That's probably the number one thing. Don't buy the steel toe versions. I didn't even know they existed, but someone did that once, and he did not have a good time. No injuries, but he was just miserable. So make sure that it does not have that steel toe in there to conduct that cold into your toes there. The IQWIX levels, and we're okay with you switching out for civilian versions with it. Just make sure that you email us, message us on Facebook, Instagram, call, text, whatever. Just make sure that you get it approved with us before you come out, because there's better options out there for some of the stuff in the civilian market. But we have to start somewhere with the IQWIX levels, because it's just a logical place to start. So the levels 1, 2, and the Gore-Tex are required. So you need the light layer, the waffle suit, and then the Gore-Tex. The other stuff's kind of recommended. Fleece cap. Don't want to say obviously, but you want something to take care of your ears underneath the helmet, or boonie cap. Some kind of neck gaiter to protect your neck. Let's see. The probably really important is the 4-piece sleep system, to take you down to, I believe it's -10 with all 4 pieces put together. Make sure you have that. And then we've also got some requirements for canteens. You need to bring at least 2 GI canteens out. That way you can put them upside down, because that Camelback's just not going to work for you. And then we also have a personal stove requirement, a fire dragon, Esbit, Coleman, Jetboil, something along those lines, and something to start a fire with. A flint and steel's cool, but a lighter works better, and matches and that kind of thing. We'll get some input from Tyler, and then we'll talk about the course specifics real quick.
No, I think you hit it pretty well. Chris even mentioned something about you were just mentioning something about gloves. Didn't mention it. You signaled gloves. Yeah, gloves, preferably mittens. Mittens with trigger fingers. That's kind of a specialized piece of equipment for tactical patrolling in cold weather. You're not going to find trigger mittens very often in the civilian market. So surplus stuff works best there. And then really everything just Cole said. We can't get around the EQWIX as either with the individual clothing or the sleeping system, just because of how we're going to tailor the FTX portion. And yeah, somebody asked, hey, is there a force on force in the FTX? Absolutely. So you're going to do a classroom portion, or you're going to do a field classes. We're in the field doing the classes for a day, and then you're going to turn around and go do an FTX for a day as well. So you're going to get to do both and put all those skills you just learned and apply it against a live thinking opponent. So
and that's miles force on force, 24-hour FTX. So important details. January 7th is the registration deadline. January 14th is our arrival day. So, you take that day to travel to us, get there hopefully by 7 p.m. And then Saturday, January 15th, we start the winter patrolling course, take you through the individual team skills, talk about shelters, site selection, sustainment, food, water, all that kind of stuff. And then the evening of the 15th, we roll into that FTX from the course and do the patrolling cycles and find each other out and fight for 24 hours. The FTX ends on the 16th in the evening. So we'll bring everyone back in, get everyone bunked down for the night, clean up in the morning, Monday, January 17th, and release everyone to go home and travel that day. That way they're not leaving after doing a 24-hour FTX, getting in wrecks and that kind of thing. Anything to add to that, Tyler?
No, I don't have anything, but Chris had something maybe.
Yeah, well, there's two questions there. One was, does S&S provide the AR-15 as well as the miles? Of course, the answer to that is yes. But will you allow? Do you not allow people to bring their own private firearm?
Yeah, we just charge a mounting fee, and they have to have that about 4.5 inches of exposed barrel length to get the SAT on there. So
yeah,
right about there.
That's what I recommend people come use for the first time. Just use an S&S weapon, because then you can see how the miles, if you're not familiar with miles and specifically how the laser attaches to the weapon, then I would say come use S&S. They don't charge you any more for it. It's the same price. So come use theirs, and then the second time you come back, use your own is probably what I would recommend. And then price break. What's the price range, guys?
So $350 for the patrolling course and FTX. That includes all the food while you're out there, the ammunition miles, all that stuff. If you come out the day before, let me check the date on that. On the 14th, if you show up by 10 that morning and help us set up, get the course ready, you can do a discount for that, and that brings it down to $200.
Whoa, geez. Okay, wow. Wow, guys, this is a steal. I was getting ready to say it's a steal at $350. At $200, you guys are losing money. Jiminy Christmas. It's hard to beat.
There's a limited number of the work party spots, so you got to jump on those quick.
There you go. Yeah, because I mean, just beating. Guys, I'm going to be honest. I said as the board of the directors, I'm the commandant of one Shepherd. I know what it costs to keep a warrior in the field, training, fed, with all the simulation systems and ammunition. Holy crap. $350 is a steal for a weekend.
Yeah, it's let me just say, oh my God, for what it is, it's amazing. I can't believe the price is that low. It's crazy.
None of these guys are getting rich off of this. They're doing this to help you. That's why the price is so low. This isn't a sound business model.
No, yeah, in our organization, we're not even a business. So, most of our guys are prior service. And one, we want to do this because we like to do it. We want to get out there and also get our training reps in. And the second thing is I'm hopeful that this knowledge continually gets passed on. I was fortunate enough, to learn from, guys like Chris and the older generation warriors during the Cold War, no pun intended, that, hey, this is how you sustain yourself and fight in a full kinetic fight, full spectrum. And my generation, we went the GWAT route, and we lost a lot of that field craft. And the only way that this field craft knowledge is going to get translated from those old FMs, right now we got all the sergeant majors looking through the old FMs going, I kind of remember doing this as a private. Well, there's got to be, there's too much of a brain drain between, Chris's, your guys' generation and the generation that's going through basic training right now. There's too much of a gap. And this is our attempt also to help kind of close that gap, is to continually put that information out there. And say, hey guys, let's continue to pass on this valuable life-saving knowledge that we shouldn't let die. So that's our motivation for doing this, at least light fighters. And so we're happy to be involved.
Yeah. Just to insinuate on what you said. We're not doing this to get rich. We just want to pass on that knowledge, learn more ourselves, and we just love doing this. And we want to train more, red-blooded, patriotic Americans on the arts of light fighting, and we're not going to skip out on the winter months.
Hey guys, so let's go around the horn one last time and finish out this topic over this cold weather warfare training. And I just want you guys to pick out one piece of gear that really stood out for your cold weather experience. Just anything. Obviously, like Chad and Doc didn't go to Winter Forge, but they have cold weather experience. So I'll start this off. A great piece of gear that I took to Winter Forge that really I felt helped me out a lot was my Marine Corps service sweater, Woolly Pulley, 100% wool. I think a lot of the modern ones are acrylic, but that was a fantastic piece of gear. I just wore that underneath my my utility blouse and Gore-Tex top and whatnot, and I felt like that really did a great job at keeping my core temperature warm. Obviously, wool's already been mentioned here tonight. Wool is just a fantastic piece of gear, and that wool service sweater was a great item for me. Even though it's a lot of guys aren't thinking of it, it's not super sexy. It's a great piece of gear. So, kick it over to Bruce.
Well, Brent sort of stole mine with the wools, but I have a backup, because here's something that didn't work for me, were my boots. Guys, you can't skimp on the boots. I had some Gore-Tex Merrells that I thought would be great, and they weren't up to snuff. You need a serious military boot that's designed for cold weather. I sort of struggled with that. I think that the wool socks probably saved me, but I'm telling you guys that do not skimp on boots. I think probably the most important thing for any military, really in any environment, is taking care of your feet. That is like 100-fold in cold weather. So make sure you have a recommended boot, and don't go out there like I did and experiment. This is not the place for it.
Yeah, I'll agree with that there. The right boot, bring that out. But I think the game-changing one for me, at least last year, was that level 5 soft shell, just how well integrated with level 1 and 2, how much more quieter it was when you're patrolling versus that Gore-Tex just rubbing on itself and just making that noise. It just made life a lot more comfortable. So definitely recommend that. For the full packing list, head over to our website, sstrainingsolutions.com. Subscribe to our YouTube channel. I think Brent's got us linked up in there. Saw a question out there. We don't require the vaccine or mask or anything like that. This is your choice, America, whatever you want to do, your body, your choice. So next, Tyler.
Yeah, so I would say obviously there's all sorts of great gear. My biggest thing was finding Gore-Tex trigger mittens. The British, they have a system, and we borrowed these from the Estonians. They actually had a bunch of British equipment, and they had very nice outer shell Gore-Tex mittens with an inner Gore-Tex mitten. When you don't want articulate type gloves when it gets really, really, really cold, and it has to do with how your fingers start radiating heat against each other. You're creating a bigger pocket to keep warm. So if you get super cold and you have articulated gloves, that's why you need to go to a mitten. And then at that point, you need trigger mittens for tactical patrolling. So I would say trigger mittens, and then bouillon cubes. That's the other big piece of gear. Always having something hot to drink with your stove, making little soups out of bouillon cubes.
Hot and flavorful, because people will stop drinking water if it's just hot water.
That's right.
Most everything's been hit on. I would just remind everybody that your body, when hypothermia kicks in, your body starts to retract blood from the extremities. So you're keeping your extremities warm is probably the most important thing. Bruce mentioned boots. Jackson mentioned gloves. I think that's probably the most important thing that I've ever experienced is, keeping those extremities warm.
So, yeah, then I'll throw in the fifth extremity, and that is your head. Make sure you have some kind of watch cap, because your body is just a furnace, and you lose so much heat going right out of the top. So make sure you're capping your furnace there, right, with some kind of fleece cap. And particularly if find one that fits comfortably under your boonie and under your helmet, right? Then my piece then, because, I was going with extremities too. It's the hands, it's the feet, and it's the head, ears, nose that gets frostbite and chilblain. So since that's already covered, I'm going to throw back into something I mentioned earlier. I'm going to say get yourself a metal GI canteen, at least one. Have a metal. It's fine to have plastic. They're not bad, but you can't throw them in the fire. Or on a stove, on a really hot stove. It's still plastic, right? Get yourself a metal canteen. And if you can find it, I was working one of the several times I got to work, it was 10th Special Forces, and their specialty was Arctic warfare back in the 80s. And I'm dating myself. I was in the Army when Christ was still a corporal. But the point is that they had these Swiss, and I think the French have them too. You can find a French canteen. They have a
Wide mouth.
enormous neck. And he's like, look, broke it out. And he's like, look, it's ice. And he took his bayonet and goes, stab, 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 and then drank it. And I was like, that is the coolest crap ever. So get yourself a metal canteen with a great big thick neck, and you won't go wrong.
The U.S. There is a USGI Arctic canteen. They're relatively cheap, so they're old school, but they work. So there you go. All right, guys. Well, that concludes our discussion. We're at 1 hour 20 minutes. That was a good discussion, guys. I appreciate both of y'all coming on. Obviously, you guys are welcome to stay around for the next topic. I know Cole already said he was going to pop smoke. I don't know about Tyler.
I've got to get out as well.
Okay. So both those guys are going to pop smoke. So, hey, I appreciate you guys coming on. This is a fantastic conversation. And I know there's a lot of excitement, and a lot of guys are, asking questions and stuff in the comment section. So for those of you that are interested in this course, if it's not already there already, I will do it as soon as the stream ends. I will post a link to the S&S Training Solutions website. Again, the course name is Winter Fours. You are expected to have some tactical competency. And I think correct me if I'm wrong, Cole, if you haven't been to an S&S Training Solutions course or a One Shepherd course before, all you need to do is email Cole and with your past experience, and he gives the, thumbs up or thumbs down on whether or not you can attend. Is that right?
Yeah, just let us know, training from another reputable school, trainer, prior service. We'll work with you, but we want to make sure that you know what you're doing before you get out there, so you're not worried about all this other stuff while you're trying not just to die in the cold. So we want it to be a experience where you actually learn and not just gut through and make it through.
All right, guys. Well, that finishes our cold weather training. I appreciate you guys coming on.
All right. Thanks for having us on. We'll see you in January.
Outstanding. All right, guys. So we're going to segue into our next conversation. I am expecting to have one more guy jump in here. That's Gabe. So whenever he gets in here, he'll jump in the conversation. But we're going to go into the Rittenhouse trial. Obviously, that's a big hot topic in the U.S. right now. And here he is. Here's Gabe. So what's up, Gabe?
Hey,
You're
Gabe.
muted, brother. Can you hear us?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Now we
We
can.
got you.
Am I loud and clear?
Yeah, we got you, man. So
How about
anyway,
5?
our next conversation is the Rittenhouse trial. Obviously, that is a big source of conversation here in the United States, and we're going to kick that around. Guys, I am like 3 beers down, working on my 4th here. I've got to take a piss, so I'm going to step out for a second. Bruce, I'm going to kick it over to you, Bruce. You can go ahead and kick this off, all right?
Brent,
Go
you
ahead.
got to remember your streamer's bottle, man, for just such an occasion. Come on, guys.
Dumb and Dumber.
We're supposed to have a professional operation here.
Just use the bottle.
All right. So he left it to me to kick off. Wow. I don't know where to start, but I can tell you this, that I followed the entire court proceedings very closely. I was able to do that at work. And I was both amazed and frightened by what I saw in terms of what goes on in our courts sometimes. There was I think it's called Raketa law. Don't hold me to that. But there was a group of multiple attorneys that stream this case every day and would comment on it. So I could learn a tremendous amount. You talk about a crash course in just learning. And they kind of Monday morning quarterback, and every time something would happen, they would say, oh, that's bad. You shouldn't do that. Oh, that's great. That's a good move. They made suggestions. And of course they were making them to the audience. No one that was actually in the courtroom were following this, but they had over 100,000 live stream views at one time. People were tuning into this group of attorneys, and it was extremely knowledgeable. I learned a lot from watching that. So a lot of what I guess I'll kind of like my impression of what was going on, I learned from watching those guys comment and interject on things that I wouldn't have normally picked up, because I'm not like a schooled courtroom guy or anything to that effect. I think I've been on a jury once. So anyway, look, I guess the elephant is in the room is, I think that I won't speak for you guys. For me, I'm glad the outcome was exactly what it was. I think it was the right outcome. I think that probably one of the biggest issues that we have with the case wasn't what went on in the courtroom, but what went on in the news media outside of the courtroom. You know, I believe it was Jackson that was mentioning earlier that, you know, his wife thought that there were black guys that were shot. And the news media, even today, even after rendered and after all the evidence has been available, and there was a camera in the courtroom, and anybody worth their salt could have watched the entire case and all the evidence. The prosecution never mentioned racism that I saw anywhere in any of it. They didn't even go there. The prosecution didn't go there. So where did the news media come up with this from? Well, they made it up. And even once they knew it wasn't true and the facts were out, and we can see the dead corpses and the dude missing the bicep of the people that were shot, and they're clearly not black or people of color. Where did this, they continued to spin the racism narrative. That's
whoa. Come on. I don't mean to place all the blame on the president. I get so tired when, oh, it's raining. Damn you, President Obama. I mean, come on. It gets, and with insert name, President Bush, President Trump, President Clinton, you know, whatever happens. Oh, my tomatoes are overripened. Damn you, President Biden. Look, I don't mean to do that. And I think it's just intellectually weak to do that. Hold the phone. President Biden, while campaigning, right? While campaigning, called him a white supremacist. I mean, hello, the highest political office in America called Kyle Rittenhouse a white supremacist. What do you mean? Where did they get it? Well, I just don't know where this dialogue came, where this narrative come that this is all about racism. His name is President Joe Biden. This is something he stepped into. It's not me blaming him for bad weather. This is something he deliberately chose to step into. And so let's call a duck a duck.
Well, you know, he also mentioned at that time that he hadn't seen the video or paid attention to the case. So I guess even as a presidential candidate and a vice president and a lifelong politician, we're playing loose and fast with the term racist. You just throw that out there first and try to be the first one to say it and hope that the colors line up, I guess, because, you know, I the only thing I can think of, because I try to give everybody the benefit of the doubt, particularly our beloved president, you know, maybe he thought that the guy was white yet racist against white people. I guess it's possible. I don't know, guys, but I never heard that brought up by anybody else. And it certainly wasn't brought up by the prosecution. And the prosecution was pretty terrible. I'll tell you that. There's a lot of issues that they had throughout the case, but accusing Kyle of racism wasn't one of them, or being a white supremacist. And I know that many times his attorney had mentioned this too, is that they handed his phone over to the FBI. The FBI hacked his phone, went through his phone, and the defense attorney was like, hey, look, he's like, if there was anything in there that Kyle had visited any type of racist, white supremacist sites, made any comments or anything at all, even jokingly, believe me, that would have been brought out by the FBI. The fact that it was never brought out tells us all we need to know. It simply wasn't there.
Well, so then if we can stay with that just for a minute, because we can certainly explore other areas. You know, I was trying to jot that down, like all the different cultural Marxist groups that were trying to jump onto this bandwagon and make this something that it wasn't. And we just mentioned one that BLM said this is about, and as well as Joe Biden, and everybody below that said, well, this is a racism. This is all about, you know, the empowering of white supremacists and, you know, blah, blah, blah. Hold on. As we just said, the shooter was not what we would define as black. And we've never defined these terms, guys. We have Negro, Caucasian, and Asian, and even those are weakly defined phenotypes. But when you say black, white, and, you know, brown or whatever it is, we've never defined these things. But under
Egyptian cinnamon.
What's that? And cinnamon?
Egyptian cinnamon.
There you go. And so what I'm saying is, while we haven't defined those, and we have to recognize that first, I don't think anybody can say that the 3 criminals shot, 2 killed, 1 wounded, that the 3 criminals shot could be defined in any way, shape, or form as people of color, right? They're not. They're Caucasian. The shooter was not people of color. He's a Caucasian. I think most of us would recognize that. They're all European ancestry, whether they were the innocent victim or whether they were convicted felon criminals. So that was there. But hold on, it goes more. Feminists wanted to discuss this and wrap this narrative because they're a cultural Marxist too. They wanted to say, well, this is evidence of our toxic masculinity, you see. But Rittenhouse was volunteering through scouts. I mean, come on, scouts are pretty woke these days, and he worked with police organizations or youth organization, which are multi-gender, welcome everybody. The testimony and evidence to Rittenhouse intent was to provide medical care to anyone who needed it, regardless of their affiliation. And this was pretty well panned out. There's video of Rittenhouse cleaning public spaces that had graffiti by BLM and Antifa demonstrators and criminals. There was video of Rittenhouse extinguishing a dumpster fire that was being pushed into property by BLM and Antifa criminals and protesters. I mean, so your toxic masculinity is equally as off point as the race card that people are pulling. And then finally, there's Antifa saying, no, this isn't about race. And this isn't about feminism. What this is evidence of government oppression in spite of Rittenhouse status as a private citizen conducting civic duties as a militia member. You don't get much more, farther away from government than a citizen militia member, right? Oh my God, it's in the name. And then also, you want to talk about government oppression. Rittenhouse wouldn't have even been there. Militia wouldn't even had to step up into the role had local and state government exercise their authority to stop this. So, Antifa was allowed free reign. And what I really hear is that they are very, very upset that private citizen militia, and the word that's now, the narrative right now is, vigilantism. Well, you're damn straight that's what that was. I don't even know why we're backing away from this word. It was vigilantism. That is. Look it up. The definition, the denotation of this term means private citizens taking the law into their hands. And that's exactly why we have a Second Amendment. It's exactly why we're allowed to form into private citizen militia, is to take the law into our hands when the government fails. And I don't mean fails out of negligence and cruelty. I mean when they're just overwhelmed, when they're not there. So this is why we have a Second Amendment. And this is why Rittenhouse was there as a member of a citizen militia. And so this was vigilantism, and it was an Antifa BLM protesters all the way up to nonviolent protesters, all the way up to criminal elements who were involved in crimes, violent crimes, and these militia stopped them through vigilante acts, stopped them in their tracks and said, look, I don't know how to do this. I'm not a trained police officer. If you're going to try and kill people, I'm going to use great prudence, but also I will be very discernible. I will be discerning in my use of deadly force, which we see incredible evidence by this 17-year-old militia member using just remarkable self-control in the most trying life and death situations. And he imposes deadly force effectively. He shuts down that was the end of it, guys. That was the night that the demonstrations ended, and they pretty much ended right there. A 17-year-old boy ended.
He wasn't even militia, right?
No, he was there as militia. He came over from Illinois with a militia group. That's why he was armed. Which, by the way, if we want to get into it, that's I suspect that's why the whole misdemeanor of he's not supposed to be carrying a weapon, that whole misdemeanor was thrown out. Well, that's because as a member of a militia, you're allowed to carry a weapon. And someone give me the U.S. code, because I do believe it's 17 to 54 years of age is the what's called the unorganized militia. That is U.S. code. That is law. U.S. law recognized 17-year-olds up to 54-year-olds can serve in a private citizen's militia. And if they are armed, that's like saying, well, a 17-year-old that joins the Marine Corps can't be armed. Are you kidding me? Yes, they can. And they are.
That case. So I made a post on my Instagram about that, and I mentioned that the case had. Can you guys hear me? Okay, am I all good? The case had all the tenets of what they were trying to attack in this country. That case itself. The first case we saw, it had first thing we could see is that, we had the AR-15 that they kept bringing out. They kept mentioning that, the AR-15 is, shouldn't be, they basically vilified them for just having the rifle itself, / being armed at all. Because they said, oh, well, if you're armed, you're the person that started the fight. So therefore, you should have you were the one that caused the problem. You instigated it. The second thing they kept asking about was the militia, the decentralized, distributed force of people, that they don't really want to have in this country anymore. And then they also made a point about how when Rittenhouse was on the sidewalk, he knew that the people didn't want him there. And they kept saying, you knew that, the crowd, the mob didn't want you there, so why were you there? And I would have been like, hey, buddy, this is a public sidewalk. I can be here whenever the fuck I want. And no matter who wants me there or not, it doesn't matter. That's their problem in their mind. If they have a problem with me being on the sidewalk in front of them, that's their freaking problem. They need to internally deal with it on their own when they get home or whatever. The fourth thing they mentioned was, well, you were there, but you weren't there to defend property, right? You believe that that's not something you can defend with deadly force. And, Kyle said, yeah, we're not, I wasn't there to defend the property. I was there to defend my life or their life or someone else's life, whatever. He had to sidestep that one because legally, not lawfully, but legally, he's not allowed to defend that property. And then the last one is defense of life, which is the last thing they want to attack in this country. And it's going to be the next thing they go after. Because, they say, well, you don't have a right to defend your property. You don't have a right to defend your liberties. And the last thing they're going to go after is you don't have a right to defend your own life. You're being selfish by taking someone else's life to protect your own. And then the prosecutor is like, hey, everyone takes a beating sometimes. It's just a skateboard in your head. It would have been funny if the freaking defense attorney walked up behind him with the skateboard and was like, okay, let's put that to practice right here,
Right. Let's start beating you to death. Let me start beating you to death in the head with a skateboard, and you determine when I'm going to let up, right? I don't mean to, I'm sorry, guys, I'm jumping in there, but you hit the nail on the head here, Hollywood, and that is, in his closing arguments, the prosecuting attorney said Rittenhouse should have taken the beating. He should have, quote, taken the beating, end quote, by the crowd of BLM Antifa, in spite of the fact that Rittenhouse's life had been verbally threatened by BLM and Antifa. This is all caught repeatedly on film and shown that Rittenhouse observed firsthand the BLM Antifa use of violence that night and actually wound up extinguishing. That's actually really what set Rosenbaum off. The first of the criminals to attack him, the first of the criminals to be shot dead, was that Rosenbaum was instrumental in pushing a dumpster lit on fire into a structure. And there were plenty of militia members around, but it was the 17-year-old Rittenhouse who walked up with an extinguisher and put the fire out. And this just set Rosenbaum off. I mean, it just really, he's already a convicted felon. He's violent. And he then verbalized, I'm going to kill you. I'm going to hunt you down, find you alone, which is exactly what he does. And then I'm going to take your weapon and kill you. And that's exactly what he attempts to do when he's shot and killed. So all of these things happen. The BLM and Antifa criminals, and we're not throwing around the word criminal. All three of these shot people are convicted felons prior to this incident. So they were there using violence to achieve a means, and they all three attacked Rittenhouse, and he defended himself with deadly force, killing 2 and wounding a 3rd. And the prosecution's closing arguments were Rittenhouse should have taken his beating. It's okay.
Well, and he ran away and
no.
retreated.
It wasn't enough to run away. Wasn't right. That's not what he said. He didn't say Rittenhouse should have run away. He already saw that. He said you should have taken your beating. In short, what he was saying. Let me cut right to the chase. Rittenhouse, you should have just died. Your life isn't more special than these 3 criminals. And you should have known that 3 doesn't equal 1. You should have done the good Marxist thing. You should have died. Why do I say that's a good Marxist thing, guys? Karl Marx never recognized and was vehemently anti-individual rights. He was anti-individual rights. He says this repeatedly. He writes about it. He argues with other people publicly in written discourse. He's anti-human rights or individual rights. He says the only rights belong to the mass, belong to the collective, belong to the mentality. So Rittenhouse was standing up against, 18 people attacking him. The good Marxist should have recognized it, handed the gun, knelt down, and been, executed like that. That's what a good Marxist does. And this is exactly what the prosecutor says. You should have taken your death like a good Marxist. Instead, you bastard, you stood up and fought against us.
And that's what I'm saying. Like when he mentions that a lot more than I was expecting him, where he actually says, they didn't want you there. They didn't like you. Why were you on the sidewalk when they didn't want you there? And I'm watching this. I'm like, if I was there, I'd have been like, dude, I don't have any duty to let you, to listen to the crowd or obey the crowd. And like you're saying, it comes back to the idea that this is like the majority rules, holy grail that they want to impose on the rest of America.
Doc, you bring up a good point. If you truly want to understand the left, you read Marx and you will understand the left, especially in America. I would challenge anybody out there, if you haven't read any of, Das Kapital, the Communist Manifesto, take a look at it. You may get a better understanding of who the true enemies are in this country. Back to Rittenhouse, though, I think kind of a more important question than who is the race of the individuals who were shot, because to me, that's irrelevant. I don't care if they're black, Asian, it doesn't matter. They were the aggressors 100% here. And that's the main question. Who are the aggressors here? Kyle, at every chance he had, retreated. And that's something I haven't heard in the media. Every chance he got, he was running away from everybody there. I mean, the video kept showing it over and over. He's running, he turns and shoots, he's running. He's moving away. To me, that's not aggressive at all. He had people chasing after him. Those were the aggressors. They got what was coming to them. And again, it doesn't matter who the race of the so-called victims are. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. It doesn't matter if they were black, white. It doesn't matter. It's irrelevant. They were the aggressors, and that's the bottom line.
I'm just gonna say, I mean, it drives me nuts. I mean, let's think back to rooftop Koreans, right? Everybody on our side of the political persuasion backs those guys up 100%. 100%. It is not a racial issue whatsoever. And it fucking infuriates me that it's coming to this in this country. These guys that are pushing this racial bullshit all the time. And I'm sorry, I'm like 4 or 5 beers in. Normally I drink coffee when I do these live streams, so I might have a few F-bombs slip out. But anyways, this racial stuff is driving me absolutely nuts. The rooftop Koreans have been held up by our side as this bastion of Second Amendment epitome, right? I mean, 100%. Those guys were defending their storefronts and whatnot. And in my opinion, this Kyle Rittenhouse was doing the exact same thing. He was helping out, fellow individuals that he knew, and they tried to paint him as this guy that came in from another. He lived like 20 minutes away. His father lived in Kenosha, 20 minutes away. That's how far I drive to work, for God's sakes. I mean, it's ridiculous. It's ridiculous, all the crap that's been pushed on this trial. Now, I didn't follow this trial as closely as Bruce. Bruce watched like every minute. And, but I turned, it on from time to time. And the times I did turn on, I couldn't believe what I was seeing. I was seeing the prosecutor arguing that Rittenhouse deliberately used Full Metal Jacket 5.56 as more lethal ammunition. Full Metal Jacket. He deliberately put Full Metal Jacket rounds in there to make his ammunition more lethal. I'm sitting there thinking, what an idiot. What is he talking about? How is this guy allowed, who's not even remotely close to being a subject matter expert, able to spew this bullshit? And the jury, who knows if they're buying it or not, And I'm just like, you got to be kidding me. How can a guy sit here and talk about Full Metal Jacket are more lethal because they're designed to penetrate through their target and hit other people behind them? I'm like, it's all fucking bullshit.
Could you imagine what the prosecutor would have said had he have used hollow points that are designed to kill people? Oh, murderer. Dude, you went out wanting to murder had you have used that. I thought that was an interesting exchange as well. And I'm going to tell you, Kyle is either the luckiest dumb guy I've ever seen or the best prepared defendant I've probably ever seen. This kid nailed it on the stand. I would not have been as good as him at my age. He had to have been extremely well prepared. When the prosecutor came after him on all the Full Metal Jacket rigmarole, he's like, look, dude, I don't know. And I'm paraphrasing. He's like, I don't know about ammo. He's like, that's what I bought. We went to my buddy's property and we shot. And I'm following because, hey, I'm a gun guy. And those of you that are watching this, you're probably gun guys too. You buy the cheap Full Metal Jacket and you go and you plink and you shoot with it because you're a 17-year-old kid and that's all you got money for. You're getting the cheapest you can get that's local, and that's what you're going to go and blast. And by God, he wasn't planning on killing anybody that day. So that's what he had loaded in his magazine. And there was no more thought to it than that. He didn't go out and spend $1 around on some type of hunting ammunition that's designed to expand. And honestly, thank God he didn't, because they would have had a field day with that had he have swapped out his ammo to something that was actually designed to kill people. That was never really brought to light. And I think that I was a little disappointed. Well, I was a lot disappointed in the prosecution, but I was particularly a little disappointed in that exchange because they played on the average person's ignorance of firearms, laws, what it was like there or anything else. They played on those jurors' ignorance, hoping that the jurors would make a mistake and convict him. And it wasn't just that one case. It happened time and time again. It happened with the whole barrel length incident. If you guys recall, one of the charges, which was a minor charge, was that he was underage to be armed. And Doc brushed on this as well. According to the state law, and I learned it, every state's different, so I learned this watching the trial. According to the state law, a 17-year-old, if you're the day of your birthday, you turn 17 and above, you can carry a rifle. You can have a rifle. You can carry a rifle. It's 16 and below, I believe, where you cannot. The exception, the way the law was written, and those of you that have studied law before understand that you have like a law, then you have these different subsections, and those can be exceptions to the law, where that if it was an SBR or an SBS. Well, the prosecution, when it was brought up to the judge is like, whoa. So the question of this whole thing wasn't age, but it was barrel length. And the judge is like, do we have a tape measure? We can measure the barrel. And the defense goes, well, yeah, we could do that, but we don't want to do that. We want to just let the jury figure it out. And the judge, which scared me, because he floated the idea of just sending the jury a tape measure. Now, us being gun guys, we understand how to measure barrel length. You don't just measure the length of the barrel, which would be common sense. You have to measure from the chamber being closed, the bolt face, to the end of the barrel, not the end of the flash hider, muzzle brake, whatever, assuming it's removable. Now, fortunately, they already had looked at this and they knew that his barrel was legal. But this is how shady the prosecution was. The prosecution knew this, and this is the prosecution for the state. The state, in my opinion, your state, if you're a representative of your state, you should not be out to get somebody. You should be completely even keeled. If you think the person's guilty, then by all means, go get them. But you should never fabricate evidence or mislead the jury or hope that the jury makes a mistake measuring something technical that they don't freaking understand and hope that they get a conviction on that. Shame on the state and shame on the prosecutor for doing that. I can't believe that your state, our state, would try to set one of us up like that. And that's exactly what they did. Fortunately for the judge goes, wait a minute, you're not arguing that the barrel's too long. You're just hoping that the jury makes a mistake. Yeah, no, I'm dismissing that. That's bullshit. Fortunately, the judge did that. Had it have been a different judge, had it have been in a different state, who the hell knows what could have happened?
No, thank God. Thank God. I don't know if that prosecutor is a Marxist. I suspect he is. Listening to him make his arguments and all this other stuff, his narrative was very much a woke Marxist narrative. But then again, I think he was really just going for the gusto. That is, he was going for a conviction. And damn the torpedoes, right? He didn't care about who was innocent. He didn't care if he was factual. I think that's what I really learned from this was those of us that understand, ballistics, bullets, we're gun guys, and we understand the parlance. We know that Full Metal Jacket is the least by the Geneva Convention. By Geneva Convention, internationally military and police recognized, Full Metal Jacket is the least lethal type of ammunition you can use. In fact, that's why it is embraced by the Geneva Convention, is because, at least in theory, it makes the cleanest wounds. The cleanest wounds. This prosecutor took that, hoped that the jury was ignorant, and kept playing the term Full Metal Jacket like it was some, explosive tip and atomic poison dart. No, you used it as if it was some kind of exotic, hyper lethal, and he repeatedly lied. He repeatedly lied. He tried to bend the truth and persuade people that, dihydra, oxide is poisonous. It'll rust metal. He never once called it what it is, water. Yeah, it rusts metal. It's also crucial for life, right? No. He tried to shamboozle. He tried to bully that jury. He did this with the barrel. He did this with the ammunition. Constantly, that prosecutor, and I don't know. I'm not a legal expert either. I don't know if this is legal, because if it is legal, what it's saying is that our legal system, our court system, puts power, the authority to bold-faced lie in the hands of the prosecutor, but then swears all of the, the testimony and the accused into, I will tell the whole truth and nothing but the truth, where the prosecutor is allowed to say, I will tell nothing but lies so I can win this case. Jesus, Mary, and Joseph. What the hell is wrong with our court system?
One of the things that was brought up was the fact that, like what Brent was saying, is they're talking about racism a lot. And, we can describe every single, in detail, every single thing they did. But I think the real thing is why they were doing it. That's the real takeaway. We go over every single detail of what they lied about and what they did and how they describe things. But you have to remember that what you're seeing here is a form of divide and conquer. So, what they're trying to do here is set up a situation where blacks and whites, men and women, everybody's fighting like cats and dogs so that they can control that population easier. And instead of having people attack the source of the problem, which is immoral behavior like theft, looting, destroying businesses, arson, and then, upholding, but beating back that violation with, use of force, such as what Kyle did or what the rooftop Koreans did in the 90s. They want to talk about how it's racism. And this is all just a way to get whites fighting with blacks, blacks fighting with whites. Just the other day, we had this black dude run over a bunch of people in a parade, probably all hyped up on the media's whatever propaganda, and decided to run people over. That's what I'm guessing. But the whole point is they have to divide and conquer working people, because at the end of the day, we can all usually agree that we don't want our whole cities burned to the ground, and at this point, the idea of self-defense of property really, really, really needs to be understood. Because if you can't defend property with deadly force, you're not going to have private property. There's no such thing as private property if you can't control what happens to it. If the mob gets to decide that. And that's exactly what communism and socialism wants, is they want all of that private property to be taken by the mob, by the collective, and, dispersed amongst themselves. So, ultimately, this is an attack on property rights. And they even go as far as attack on your own property, individual property, such as your life. Your life is your own property too. Your body is your property. And you ask some people and you say, is your body your property? And they, well, I don't know, I'm gonna die soon. Well, yeah, you're using your body right now, right? So it is your property. These people don't understand that there's a lack of understanding of boundaries in this country. People don't recognize the difference between your property and their property, your life and their life, your body, their body. They're all trying to conglomerate into one thing and act like there's no boundaries there. There's no line in the sand. And what Kyle did and what other people have done in the past, like the rooftop Koreans, is they clearly drew that line between what's theirs and what's yours. And they used a wall of bullets to make that line. And these people want to cross it because they're in denial of reality. They don't believe in property rights. Well, you don't have to believe it, but you're going to believe that there's definitely something stopping you from taking it. And that's why they're trying to divide and conquer, because people are going to catch on to that.
Man, I'm sorry. This is like, Miltech and I are going back and forth here. Guys, please jump in and tell us when to shut up. But I think you're absolutely right. Dude, I will say, Gabe, that you're absolutely right here. I think that's one of the reasons this was so hotly contested. Let's talk about it. Like, if you don't have individual rights, but you advocate mass rights, then what you're saying, and this is actually what Marxists relied on, was that the mass of people will rise up against the government in power, or they'll rise up against the skin color in power, or they'll rise up against the wealthy in power, right? And you need these grassroots masses to rise up against them. Well, you have the people that are betraying Antifa. BLM and Antifa see the American people as betraying them because they thought we would run to their cause. And so now they're burning down cities, right? And they're saying, see, we're the masses. And when the government stood aside, when the wealthy stood aside, when, all these people stood aside, the small people, the tiny private citizens came up and cleaned up the graffiti and cleaned up the mess. And the tiny people, they came with fire extinguishers and first aid kits. Who the hell comes to a war with fire extinguishers and first aid kits? But that's what the tiny people did. They came with that. And oh, by the way, they also said, oh my gosh, this is very dangerous. They're burning things. Maybe we should bring something to defend ourselves too. So they did. And then sure enough, the Marxists saw this and said, whoa, why aren't you on our side? We're the ones who are against whatever we're against, religion, economics, wealthy, government. You should be on our side. And they said, no, we're not. And please stop burning down our city. And this was a betrayal to the Marxists. This was the coldest, the hardest betrayal to them. And when they tried to intimidate the little people with literal attempts to murder them, publicly kill them, as a group for the video to say, see what we do to people who betray us, the little people pulled out their weapons and shot the Marxists dead. This is a horrific betrayal of BLM and Antifa by American citizens. And the irony, the bitter irony, is that by definition, a private citizen militia is exactly who the Marxists want on their side. That's exactly who they need on their side. And those people betrayed the Marxists. That's why this is so important. Regardless whether you're a feminist, you're a Marxist. Whether you're a racist, you're a Marxist. Whether you're an economist, you're a Marxist. Doesn't matter. You're a Marxist if you're saying, critical theory and power struggles and we're going to overthrow. That makes you a Marxist by definition. And you need the people, and the people rejected the Marxists. And that's what this is about.
Chad, you got a lot of experience in this type of military political history. What do you think about it?
I think we've kind of spent a lot of time harping on all the bad stuff. I think that there's a lot of ignorance out there. Ignorance can be a weapon. It was the prosecution attempted to weaponize the ignorance of the jury by using words like full metal jacket, assault weapon, things like that. There's a lot of it out there, but I think the main question is now, where do we go from here? I think there is a light at the end of this tunnel. I think there's a lot of negative here, but there is a light at the end of this tunnel, and that is that a lot of these cities prepared for some of these new protests that have been sparking up since the end of the trial by mobilizing National Guard. I think they learned a valuable lesson from this. So I think there is a light at the end of the tunnel. Some good came from this. And I think the burning of our cities, I think it's going to slow down a little bit. But I want to reiterate what Doc keeps saying about Marx. If you truly want to understand leftist thought, if you don't have any concepts, because most of us are individualists. That's what it means to be conservative in America today. Being conservative in Europe is a lot different than being a conservative in America. They're collectivists over there, all of them. But if you want to understand the collectivist thought, you've got to read some of this stuff and understand where these people are coming from. Then you'll know how to fight it. Marxists like to use words as weapons. That's why they brought out the race card. It's a weapon, and it's a powerful weapon. It works pretty well. They're great at propaganda. Absolutely great. They're a lot better at it than we are. So I would, someone wrote Selinsky in the comments. Yeah, if you haven't read Saul, I think it's Alinsky, Rules for Radicals, that's a great book. It's a great book to understand the mentality of where these people are coming from. We can't defeat what we don't understand.
Well, and here's another thing. If you think back in history when all these other Marxist revolutions were taking place, if you think about like when they took over Russia or, Venezuela and all these other places, these places did not have the same level of armament for the individuals. And I'm talking like, even if you think about, World War II versus today, one person with an AR-15 can take out an entire squad. If you get the drop on 12 guys or 9 guys on, with an AR-15, and you don't miss, all your shots, if you draw a drop on them, you could take them all out. So the individual rifleman at this point in history has more firepower than, say, the average rifleman during 1930s or whatever, with bolt actions and this and that. So right now, each person can take out dozens of people if they're in the right spot. And what that means is that you can basically have a chain reaction where as soon as when one group of guys goes down, it can domino effect and make the rest go down with it. It just takes one guy to get in the right spot to cause a domino effect like that. When you think about what they were attacking, it's everything standing in the way of that mob rule. They can't get away with the things that they were getting away with in these other countries, like they were. Like in the United States, there's a big block in their way, and that's the American working class, middle class, armed, individuals that have the power now to basically, even if they're outnumbered, really, they could wipe out all those people if they try to bum rush you and try to take all your property and burn everything to the ground. So what you're really upset about is the fact that they want to make a round hole, a square block fit into a round hole, and there's something in their way, and it was in there by design because of the Second Amendment.
That's such a good point. That's such a good point, Gabe. You're absolutely right, and you touched on something that maybe is the bigger picture, which is that in many countries, your general population is not armed. And obviously, that's by design. Almost all of them were armed at one point, and they aren't anymore. In this country, we are still armed. And you add a kid, 17 years old, practically, let's face it, no training, with one AR-15, neutralized 3 targets, 0 collateral damage, and was able to successfully make his way back to, we'll say, peaceful lines behind where the cops had a perimeter set up. Imagine if that was a squad of 12 guys that were trained. I mean, it goes to show, I think, what the power of and the importance of owning a firearm like an AR-15 or anything with similar capabilities really is. This guy had, how many of us are out there? We've got plate carriers and helmets and comms, and we've got multiple magazines and special ammunition and flashlights. Man, this kid didn't have jack. He had one magazine, full metal jacket, the cheapest he could buy at Walmart probably, and a cheap AR-15, and was able to, no training, was able to accomplish what he accomplished. That scares the Marxists.
Yeah, that scares the hell out of them.
That's right.
They're thinking, well, what happens when someone really trained shows up to the party? And, like I said, they've been in denial of reality, and that was a big slap in the face back to, reality, back to what's really true. They're not getting through that like they did in Venezuela. Venezuela, even, I was talking to a guy from Venezuela, and the kind of guns they did own before the takeover were like semi-auto handguns and things like that. They were not. I said, what about ARs or semi-auto rifles? Nope, we really didn't have that. It was just mainly handguns. Well, we're not Venezuela, guys.
That's right.
I mean, there's freaking 2 rifles there. You know what I'm saying? There's 80 million armed Americans, 30 million AR-15s out there. They're not going to have that kind of easy time. So they have to divide and conquer and get those guns out of everybody's hands, attack the militia, and raise an army upon their ruins.
Well, if we have more business owners, and I mean, if these business owners just put out the word out, there's going to be Kyle Rittenhouses that are going to respond, right?
Yeah.
That's all it takes. That's all it takes. Have these people coming with their weapons and guarding these businesses, and you won't see any of these fucking riots anymore. There's 2 times these past couple years that have just infuriated me to no end. One of them was the race riots that took place last year, and then there was the Biden's withdrawal from Afghanistan. Those 2 just set me over the edge. I was so infuriated. I've never been that angered in my life, except for in combat. But if individual citizens take up arms, I don't give a shit what race you are, what sex you are. If you are a private business owner and those guys defend their business, you won't have this crap. You won't have these people, these quote social justice warriors trying to break into stores because they want to get some Air Jordans in the name of social justice. That won't happen no more. Those individuals will defend their livelihood.
It just takes a little resistance. I don't mean resistance in the term of revolution. I just mean resistance in the term of not making it easy. I'm looking at businesses opening their doors and letting groups of thugs and rob them blind and just hold the door for them. What the hell? I mean, in the 80s, that would have never happened. I don't know what's happened to our country, and I guess it's got to do with corporations running things and lawyers taking over everything. But I just, I think it's important for everyone out there to understand it. And I know that they don't understand it, but eventually that group's going to walk into the wrong store. That group's going to walk into the store where there's somebody that's armed and it's like, not while I'm here. You're not going to risk my life. And it's going to end up in a very, very, very different outcome. It'll be a huge news story. I'm sure somebody will be called racist because that's the first thing that we do anytime that anything happens anytime. But listen, that doesn't bring those people back. And I'm going to tell you, for the rioters and the looters that ran up against Kyle Rittenhouse and thought that whatever, I don't know what they were thinking. Let me tell you guys something. I don't know what's wrong with these guys. If they had a mental illness, or if this society we live in had conditioned them to not understand the consequences of their actions. But if I see a guy armed with a weapon like an AR-15, I'm not going to chase him down the street and try to hit him with the skateboard. That's what we used to call, before the word was verboten, retarded. You don't do that, man. Like, what do you think is going to freaking happen to you? And for the last guy who 2 other people had been killed, and now you're going to come at him. What's wrong with you, man? Like, what did you think? What did you think was going to happen there?
Okay, so all of these criminals, all 3 of the criminals, wind up dying or being, wickedly wounded. Let's just say that. And they did it from not their own stupidity. They weren't being stupid. These are predators. Look at their crimes. These are predators. They know how to size up a target. They know how to look for weakness. They know how to isolate a target. Look at them. Look at what Rosenbaum says. I'm going to find you alone tonight. I'm going to take your gun. I'm going to kill you. He's telling you exactly what he's doing. I'm looking for the weakest of you, the youngest. I'm looking for you. I will isolate you. Then I'm going to kill you. That is repeatedly what happens to Rittenhouse time and time again. He continues. In fact, my one criticism, I'm like, this just is really sloppy militia work. You can tell how untrained they are because they couldn't even keep positive control of their own members. He screams this, then minutes later, effectively isolates the youngest of the group and then goes to kill him. And that is repeated. Look, they aren't stupid. They aren't retarded. They're predatory criminals who were trying to use what had been successful for them in the past, save one glaring exception, and that is, your target is armed. That never happened to them in the past. None of those 3 criminals have ever isolated and targeted a armed victim. They did this.
I want to tell you guys a story, but before that, Chad, do you have anything that you were going to say before that?
I don't think anything's really going to change until the mechanisms of the political left are dismantled. And I'm talking about the mainstream media, social media. You want to talk about fascism. Fascism is corporatism, and that's big tech in line with governments. And that's what we have right now is a fascist social media platforms that censor conservatives, censor conservatives' thought. Who knows what's going to happen to this video after this conversation? But I don't think anything's going to change. So my question to you guys would be, how do we change the big picture? How do we think on the strategic level and change the political mechanisms that are held by the far left in this country?
Well, I think what law they were trying to sign into law in Florida about being able to shoot rioting, looting people, I think that's a step in the right direction. I think that's going to stop that disconnect that a lot of these guys have, thinking that they can steal, and it's going to be some, that as long as they're unarmed when they do it, they can kind of get away with it. But I want to tell you guys a story before we get too far deep into that. There was a RV on fire a year or two ago. I was driving back from work in my truck, and an RV was on fire on the side of the road, just starting to go on fire. I had pulled over to see if anybody was okay, if everybody was out of the RV. And I have fire extinguishers in my truck because I go off-roading a lot, right? And I see trucks burn up on the trail all the time, and one's not enough. I usually keep 2 or 3 fire extinguishers in my truck. I rolled up. There was a Las Vegas Police Department dude in tan, whatever, officer, and I grabbed my fire extinguisher, and I had the other one. I said, "Hey, let's go put this, let's see if we can put it out, because it's just starting in the back of the RV, And he's like, I don't know, I don't know. And this guy had like slick back hair, and it was all, Iceman status, from Top Gun. And he's like, okay, let's do it. So I run up across the street, and I punch a hole in that fiberglass, and I start spraying the fire extinguisher in the back. And as I do that, a lot of smoke starts coming out, and the fire extinguisher goes empty. And I look behind me, I'm like, hey bro, give me the other fire extinguisher or something like that, right? And I look back, and the cop is on the sidewalk 100 feet away, still standing there. He's like, come on, man, it's not worth it. Just let insurance take care of it. And I look back at the thing, and it starts to flame back up again, and I start coughing. Like, fuck. So I run back, and then he's like, yeah, man, it's not worth it. And I'm thinking, dude, you're getting paid $56,000 fucking dollars to be a cop. I just did this for free, ran across the road, and you're still standing there. And a lot of these people have this mentality, we'll just let insurance take care of it. Well, if they break into your house, just let the insurance take care of it. Oh, if they steal your car, just let insurance take care of it. I'm sorry, but I don't have that kind of insurance on all my stuff.
Well, if they slice the pilot's throat open with a box cutter, don't do anything. Let's let insurance take care. And we're in an airplane. Just let the terrorists have their way, dude. You don't understand how long that was. Decades old advice. Decades old advice. If the terrorists take the airplane, just let them have their way.
And the thing is, what are we going to start doing? Oh, hey, I walk into a Nike or Apple store. Hey, is this place insured? All right, just put it on my insurance tab. What are we having, food stamps for merchandise now? Like just using the insurance companies? This is not going to lead to more security. It's going to lead to what's happening in San Francisco. And again, we need to get over this idea that defending property is a wrongdoing. If somebody's violating your property rights, which that's what theft is, they're committing a wrong. To respond with force is not violence. It's using force in self-defense of your property, your life, your liberty. People need to stop thinking like this is some sort of big sin against humanity. It's not. If we allow this to continue, it's just going to get worse because people are lying to themselves thinking they can steal and not have it be a wrongdoing.
I think what you're talking about goes back to my comment earlier that there's a lot of ignorance around this country, and some people think property can be replaced, and so it's really hard to fight. So that's why I'm saying there's an intellectual aspect to this battlefield that we've kind of abandoned. We've left the universities, we've left social media, we've left the mainstream media, with the exception of Fox News and OAN. That's about it. That's all we got. Talk radio. That's it. But I think there is an intellectual aspect to this where, it's up to us to not only, do everything that we've been talking about, defend yourself, defend your property, but to educate some of these individuals, because a lot of these people don't know. I mean, we still got people who think Kyle Rittenhouse shot black people, and it's been plastered all over the news for months now. And I don't know if it's just, not paying attention or what, but there isn't what I'm trying to get at is there's an intellectual part to this that we've abandoned. And I think we need to kind of shift gears towards that a little bit more.
That's a good point. That's a good point, Chad. And I agree completely that, Jackson had mentioned, his wife didn't realize that there wasn't a black person involved. The point being is this: I don't think this group of followers and ourselves, truly understand how many people get their news from Yahoo News or from, whatever pops up. There's a tremendous population in this country that goes, I follow the news. Really? Well, what do you follow? Well, I follow Yahoo News. I need to find out every day who Kim Kardashian's sleeping with. And it changes daily. That's not a crime, right? Like, there's a tremendous population that's where they get their news. And they assume that when Kim Kardashian is caught sleeping with some other dude, that's true. And they assume that when there's another story below there that says Kyle Rittenhouse, proclaimed white supremacist, kills a bunch of black people, that's true. They don't go any farther than that. They're just depending, this is my news, this is what's happening, and this must be the truth. And they don't question it because they're presuming if it's in print, if it's on the internet, hell, it must be true, right? And then they may hear it, they may flip the channel and MSNBC's on, and they hear the same thing being told, and they flip over to CNN. Dude, that's 3 stories right there. Confirmed, it must be the way it is. So,
and one of them's from the president. Look,
even the president said it. It's got to be true. Everybody loves Sleepy Joe. He's just a nice old dude, right? So the point to Chad's point, education. You're right. We have a duty to get that information out there and go, wait a minute, now this isn't true. And not only say it's not true because they'll immediately dismiss us because we're not news agencies, we're not the president, right? But what we can do is go, here's the trial. Here's the truth. Now ask yourself, and this is the follow-up question to them, why are you getting your news from sources that are intentionally lying to you? And I think that may be part of the key to help them. This isn't who's sleeping with who, right? We're talking about serious stuff that impacts people's real lives. Why are you listening to a source that you now know is misleading you? And ask yourself the question, why are they misleading you?
Yeah, okay. So I think that Chad made some excellent point, and I do want to get to the positive, but here's where I do lose hope. Look, Twitter and Facebook cut off the sitting president of the United States of America, the sitting president. They cut off his communication. They cut off his account. Let me say that again. Let me put it in the most ineloquent, convenient terms that I can say. I think Trump was a dumbass. I didn't vote for him either time. I don't really like him as a person, and I don't think he was a very good statesman representative of our country, okay? I just don't like Trump. Dude, he was the sitting president of the United States of America, and Twitter and Facebook came and said, well, we're a social media and a private organization, so we can deny anybody their First Amendment rights. If you can shut down, if you're Marxist, corporatist, fascist oligarchy can shut down the sitting president of the United States of America, I'm afraid the 5 talking heads on this live feed have no hope in hell of ever, correcting that.
Well, they're not going to be able to talk their way out of it.
Doc, let's just clarify. You didn't vote for Clinton and Biden. Let's just make that clear.
Everybody knows he's the Bernie supporter.
I have voted for libertarians, and the worst thing about libertarians, I mean, it's a great party. I just wish it wasn't filled with libertarians. You will never find a more spoiled, they're just 2-year-olds. 2-year-olds know one word: no, 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 no. And then they put their ice cream in their hair. Libertarians are retarded. They're just really, really not capable. I don't want to say anti-intellectual. They're not. They're very intelligent. It's one reason I was so attracted to the Libertarian Party. it's compassionate, it's intellectual. They are the most inefficient, incapable. I mean, they just, they shoot themselves in the foot and then they fall headfirst into a toilet. And that's what they do every election day. So they're just, I will never be a card-carrying member of the Libertarian Party because there's so many libertarians. But nonetheless, I vote for libertarians. Or I write in Teddy Roosevelt, Bull Moose Party. I wish they'd bring back the Bull Moose Party. I would totally join it.
I want to piggyback on that because I voted. Let me preface this by saying I voted for Trump twice, but he is by no means like going through the Marine Corps, 20 years of Marine Corps service. This guy is not what we epitomize as a leader. Like if you think of like all the attributes that you attribute to a leader, what a leader is supposed to epitomize, he's not it. 14 leadership traits. He's not it. 100%. Biden is not it. Clinton is not it. Biden, 50 years in politics, is 100% not it. But neither is Trump. So all these people that are clinging to Trump, how about we get a real fucking leader up there? Somebody that will represent us, represent the country well. Okay?
DeSantis for president.
Oh, there you go. I was about to say, there you are representing John from afar. Yeah. John at UW Gear. Yeah, maybe DeSantis will be the guy.
DeSantis or honorably served United States Navy. So, anyways, that's beside the point. I'm just saying, if you're heartbroken or dead set on Trump, he is not. Now, let me say that Trump has done a lot of great things, but he has done a lot of stuff that has not been great things. All the stuff that happened in Afghanistan. Hey, I'm not convinced that Trump would have done the same thing that Biden did. Trump was 100% on the road to pulling every swinging dick out of Afghanistan, and that would have happened the exact same way. So, it is what it is. Idols of mine, General Mattis, who became the Secretary of Defense, resigned. I mean, come on, seriously?
Hey, I would like to announce that I'm actually running for president, 2024. Day one, I will pardon all militia members defending their property. So, yeah, that will be my first order. As long as they can show proof.
Can I get a Gabe for President sticker with a really good high detailed photo of your face on there, looking kind of a little bit goofy? No.
Gabe, when would you even be eligible age-wise? What are you, 20?
I'm 31 in about 12 days.
Hey, I love you. I love you, man. But when you step off on patrol looking like the early 2000s Land Warriors program, I can't vote.
Welcome to No Tech Moto.
I still remember the red rucksack.
Get your ass up that fucking hill. I didn't give you permission to die. Get up.
All right.
No, but the thing is, the whole idea of justice in general in this country, it's a bougie. Look, right now we're living in a bougie Demolition Man meets freaking 1984 time frame. Okay, like the whole idea that you're guaranteed a trial. For example, hey, don't I get a trial? Well, you know what? It doesn't matter if you believe in Jesus, Allah, or Lord Savior of the state. If you break into my house, the only person you're going to be judged by first is me, okay, as a threat, and you're probably going to die. You're not guaranteed a trial. Trial is something you get after you make it out of your victim's grasp. If you can make it out of the convenience store after you rob them, and we capture you somehow, that's when you get a trial. You're not guaranteed a trial. I mean, you're entitled to one if you make it out alive from their victim's, line of sights. But this idea that everyone gets a trial and that everyone has to be captured by police is bougie. It's a bougie mentality. I'm sorry, but we can't afford to capture every single criminal and have the police capture them when there's a riot. Okay, if you expect that from your enemies as a Marxist, I don't expect my enemies to give me less than lethal force. if I try to wrong them or if I try to grab their guns. It doesn't matter if it's right, if I'm in the right or not, if I'm defending freedom or whatever. I'm not going to expect my enemy to hold back. And these people are, because they're conditioned to think that they're guaranteed a trial, that they are guaranteed to be caught by police and have that process. This process itself is benefiting criminals more than anybody, because who has more people wanting to kill them? Me. I've never stolen anything from anyone willingly, at least. I don't have very many enemies. You know who has a lot of people that want to kill them today? People that rape nine-year-olds in the booty and, live to tell about somehow. These people are kept alive by this apparatus. Artificially, I might add, because normally these people would be dead. All the people that attacked Kyle, if the victim was armed, probably would have been dead 5-10 years ago. So at the end of the day, we have this bougie system that's protecting criminals, prolonging their lifespan. And then when the police don't show up and they get killed, everyone can't believe what they're seeing and freaking throws a fit. It's natural law. Okay, if you harm other people, you're eliciting the self-defense principle from them. And they don't have any moral obligation to run away from you, to use rubber bullets. In a perfect world, we'd use stun guns and you'd freeze in mid-stab, and then they'd pick you up and put you in a cage, right? But we don't have a perfect world. So what do you get? The next best thing, an AR-15 round to the chest. These people don't understand this.
So then that's a good, let me try and segue back to Chad's answer. How do we solve it? How do we solve it? Because we're not going to solve it. We don't own Twitter. Okay. We're probably, none of us are going to run for president. God forbid. I have way too many skeletons. They'll figure out that I'm retarded. So that ain't going to happen. Trust me.
Your sex robot's stream will be campaigning out against you, Doc.
I was about to say,
the sex robot could be a benefit.
Oh, that's right. Then again, if I show up with them and I'm the sex robot party, one for every household, then I might win. So here's how I think, Chad. I think, look, I had an old professor of mine, and I loved how he said this. He said, I can't make the world a better place. What I can do, what is within my power, is to improve the ground I stand on. Just this tiny little spot that I occupy and the people that I can talk to within earshot. And of course, that starts with your family. If you're a father or you're a mother, start talking to them. I want to advocate homeschooling, but even if you don't, that's okay. Be involved in their education. Be involved in their education, and because the Marxists control all of the educational institutions, and be involved so that you can give the other side of the coin. Look, what's that old Chinese, adage? Something to the effect of, if you want to, have tomatoes, plant today. If you want to have, olives, plant 5 years ago. If you want to have pecans, plant 50 years ago, that sort of thing. And so that adage winds up saying, the best time to plant a tree was 100 years ago. The second best time to plant a tree is today. What I'm saying is we haven't lost yet. And I think you are right, Chad, that there's a lot to be hopeful for. And I think what we do is we use what we've learned and what we've seen, and particularly what we've seen from this outcome with Rittenhouse. I think we use that to educate the people that we can talk to right around us, the ground that we stand on.
Excellent
I
point.
agree.
Excellent
I
point.
tell you that, agreed, Chad and Doc, that, maybe there is something to be hopeful for. Every now and then, if you ignore reality long enough, it will slap you open-handed in the face. And I think that's what happened to the media and even individuals that followed the media that didn't realize what was actually going on in this trial. But those 12 jurors that we that heard this case and made the decision on this case all came to agree that it was quite the opposite result of what the media, despite all their attempts, had tried to paint. They chose not to follow that narrative and to actually do their duty as jurors, to pay attention to what was going on in the trial, and all come together and find Rittenhouse not guilty on all counts. And I think that was maybe there's hope in this country for jurors like those 12 that were picked out that seem to be relatively diverse in political affiliation, and the fact that maybe with a hope and a prayer and maybe a little help from Gabe, we can get that sex robot that we've all been waiting for.
I'll be happy to help tune that robot too, and my years of experience and knowledge.
I bet you you're like Dr. Q, man.
It's like if James Bond was Dr. Q. That's the way I prefer to look at it. Well, I mean, yeah, you gotta educate your kids too. That's the one thing that nobody talks about. You know, think about how many kids grow up never learning shit from their parents. You know, like literally never talk ever about right and wrong behavior, and then they wind up on the freaking side, like on the middle of the road, chasing some guy with an AR-15. You know, trying to burn businesses down. Like, you know, I could kind of see if there was a police department that was super corrupt and they were planting drugs on people and ruining their lives and, you know, taking money from them every time they pull them over. If you destroy the police station, for example, I could kind of see you doing that and not understand why, you know, because it's directly attacking that group of people that are committing the wrongdoings. But the fact that they are, you know, like all of a sudden attacking the small businesses and Target and all these other things that have nothing to do with what that police department is involved in, you know, just goes to show that they're amoral individuals. They don't understand right from wrong, because it's not self-defense. That's the only time you can harm other people and not have it being an additional wrongdoing. But they don't, you know, they don't even care. They don't know. If you ask them what's right and wrong, they wouldn't be able to tell you. And that's half the issue is, you know, in order to have freedom, you need to have a moral society. As freedom increases in that society, so will as morality increases in that society, so will freedom. And, you know, we don't have it. The less moral the society is, the less freedom it's going to have, and the more likely it's going to have things like what we saw over that summer. So people really need to start teaching their kids this.
I just want to jump in here. So we've kind of gone past the Rittenhouse thing. It's kind of morphed into a bigger dynamic here. And I just want to say, I mean, there's a whole thing that it ties into, but I posted something recently. There was a Marine Corps that put out a commercial, and the commercial, I'm just paraphrasing here. The commercial was a young man. He sees this parade go by of Marines. And then it goes through the young man, joins the Marine Corps, goes through his career, and then it ends with him as an older man watching a parade of Marines going by, and then another younger person sees that. And I posted something on Instagram. I'm like, man, this commercial, this recruiting commercial really struck a chord with me. And then compare this to the Army's commercial with I'm Ella with two mommies. You know what I mean? And somebody posted on there, U.S. military's woke, blah, 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 blah. It's lost, all this other crap, which is a bunch of crap. It's a bunch of crap. And the reason I say that is because the people in this country, the good men and women, are gravitated towards service, right? Those Marxist communists that Doc and Chad are talking about, they're gravitated towards your Antifa and BLM. The good men and women are gravitated towards military service, law enforcement, fire departments, and stuff like that. They will always be that way because they're about service and devotion to one's country and civic duty. Okay, so what I'm getting at, what I'm trying to summarize is, no, those institutions are not lost. No matter what political organization tries to impose on those organizations, those good young men and women are still serving in those organizations and will continue to serve. Okay. And they might have their higher ups, i.e., certain branding organizations, coming down with directives, and those young Marines and sailors and soldiers are going to, do their duty. But in the end, those good folks are still going to be gravitated toward that service. Those organizations are not lost. So that's all I'm getting to. The notion that the U.S. military is gone woke as a whole is just bullshit. 100% bullshit. The notion that law enforcement, civil service, firefighters, all that stuff has gone woke and all this crap, it's just BS, guys. Come on, be real.
I'm glad to hear you say that, because I've been out so long that it's easy to believe the hype. And I'm actually, and especially in the wake of that damn Army commercial. But I'm glad to hear you say that. And that does resonate with me, Brent, that if you feel the calling, the calling to serve your community, the calling to serve your nation, it would be very hard for me to believe that calling and these values resonate with the woke crowd. So I'm glad to hear you say it. And yeah, certainly hope that's the case. I suspect it is the case.
I didn't mean to kill the conversation, guys. You can jump. Something pick up, man.
I thought we were going to go around. I mean, I thought, like you said, this is kind of wrapped up. We've moved beyond the Rittenhouse case. Shall we? Yeah, I didn't know we were wrap it up and go around the room, or what? What were you going to do there?
I don't want to speak for everybody, but I particularly like Drunk Brent and would like to see him on more live streams because, dude, I've never seen this side of Brent. He's kind of a teetotaler. So let's make sure we all send him. Look at this guy. He's drinking like a real Marine.
I'm waiting for him to break out the saxophone, bro.
But none of us knew that Brent suffered from TB until just now.
I keep waiting on him to come back.
No,
I keep waiting on him to come back from his restroom break wearing some BDSM garb or something. Like, I don't know what to expect tonight.
Where's your saxophone, Brent?
Hey, so this has been an exceptionally awesome stream, fellas. I've really enjoyed it.
Well, I did too. And so if you don't mind me, I would like to grab an opportunity to talk about one thing that we haven't, and it's just really a parting shot if we want to wrap up, or we can explore it. It doesn't matter to me. But one thing I want to say is this, and that is that in June this year, let me remind you guys that the Ninth Circuit U.S. Court in California struck down the ban, the California magazine ban. Remember that? That's just in June. The rationale behind that judge's and that court's decision was this. They said, this is a standard magazine. It's not a high capacity. This is the standard magazine. A magazine is an integral part of a firearm system. And your argument, this was the people arguing, hey, we need this for the state of California. We need this ban. The Ninth Circuit Court said your argument that these firearms, specifically AR-15, are only suitable for military and law enforcement service. Actually, this is what they said. You read it. They say that actually supports the citizens' argument that these are also viable weapon systems, necessary weapon systems for a private citizen militia. Now, again, listen to that. He says, that's a standard magazine. It's part of this weapon system. And your argument that this is suitable for military service is precisely why it is an appropriate weapon system for a private citizen militia. That's all came out in June this year from the Ninth Circuit Court. What we see in the Rittenhouse case is an affirmation that AR-15 are, in fact, just as the Ninth Circuit Court said, they are, in fact, appropriate for service in a private citizen militia. I think, yeah.
regardless of what the mainstream media says and these Yahoo News says, but the courts seem to be affirming and leaning in the direction that we want them to lean in lieu of the narrative that the mainstream media would have you believe.
I think this just answered the question when people say, hey, why do you need an AR-15? You just simply need to say Rittenhouse, and the argument's done.
That's, if you see this picture I just posted, the slide right here, you know, that kind of goes back to that part right there. I don't know if you can see it, Brent. I got it for you.
You guys got to remember, Brent doesn't have the dexterity he had at the beginning of this.
Well, and it was Judge Benitez, I believe, who made this point. And actually, this was like his points, if you read them, were actually one of the most based, interpretation of that law when it came out. Because if you notice Scalia, I'm not a big fan of Scalia's decision, because he started doing word magic too when he started saying, oh, the weapon has to be in common use. Well, excuse me, but like if I start getting my pulse rifle out that I invent and we start having to shoot Terminators, does that mean I'm not allowed to have that because it's not in common use? It's like a prototype. It makes no sense. The idea of a militia is that, it's going to be decentralized, distributed amongst the population. It's voluntary, okay, and it's there to protect. It's there to maintain the security of a free state of being. Okay, you have to have, in order to maintain freedom and security, you have to have that militia. And not supposed to be directed by the government either. I mean, even in the Militia Act, if you read through it, it says that the militia can, the president can call up the militia, and the militia can show up to the president's call if they have no objections. So even the Militia Act doesn't make the militia subservient to the government. The whole idea there is that it's decentralized and tied off.
You're spot on. And for the guy who said we shouldn't drink and do this, I only come to this live stream because I can drink.
Best live stream ever.
I thought that was the point.
Your old lady ain't gonna walk by and keep tabs on how many beers you're putting down.
That's right. This live stream, I want to go ahead and set it clear right now. These are drinking people who have a political, rhetoric problem.
This is the equivalent of the Green Dragon in the Revolutionary days. Chad, do you know what the Green Dragon is?
I can't say that I do.
Oh man, okay. I thought you military history guys would know this, and maybe I'm saying it wrong. But wasn't the Green Dragon the name of the tavern where some of the forefathers got together and put together some of the ideas for the revolution? Look it up. Tell me if I'm wrong.
I did not know that. That is awesome.
Yeah, I didn't.
Yeah, either. the only revolutionary tavern I'm aware of is Ton Tavern. Is that right, Chad?
Amen, brother. Amen.
Ed, I got another slide for you. This one right here. You can post it, Brent. This one right here. It says, what is the use of a militia? This is Elbridge Gerry, 5th Vice President of the United States. It is to prevent the establishment of a standing army, the bane of liberty. Whenever governments mean to invade the rights and liberties of the people, they always attempt to destroy the militia in order to raise the army upon their ruins. And if you had to visualize this, this would be a standing army, right? Let's say there's paratroopers decide to invade 3 key points, whatever. A militia is supposed to be decentralized to, basically swarm those armies, something like that. So, the whole idea that they wouldn't have the weapons necessary to beat back that kind of force, weapons used by the military is asinine. It really goes back to having the power of attorney given to your employer you know, and then signing a contract with your employer for your wages or something. There's at no point was the regulation of the Second Amendment supposed to mean government regulation. The Second Amendment is a check on the government.
And to take this back to the topic du jour, I really do believe that for many reasons that we've already previously brought up, that this really was a court case against the idea of militia, like the arming of militia, the forming of militia, the authority of the militia. And it was such an odd one because, of course, that's what BLM and Antifa had in effect formed, their own militias. You can call it by anything you want, but they had in fact formed these political action groups that went out, armed or otherwise, and clearly they showed that they were armed. On many, many occasions, there have been shootings on both sides of this, these two movements. And so, they're showing that they're a militia. I'm pro-militia. So I'm like, yeah, that's cool. But when one militia put the other in check, Antifa and BLM did not like that.
Mm-hmm. All right, so I'm gonna throw this out there about the Green Dragon, because we all love military history, right? So this is still there today. You can go there and have a beer today. The Green Dragon Tavern has a long and rich history, playing an important part in the freedom of Boston during the War of Independence. Established in 1654, the Green Dragon was a favorite haunt of Paul Revere and John Hancock, whose brother lived next door. It has been ratified by Daniel Webster, the famous historian, that it was indeed the Green Dragon where the plans for the invasion of Lexington and Concord were overheard, thus starting the famous ride of Paul Revere. Now we all know.
Hey, I appreciate it, Bruce. Hey, guys, we're at like 8 mics until 3 hours.
Pop smoke, baby.
We haven't done 3 hours in a while. We've kind of been sitting at the 2 hour mark for a while. So obviously we've had a good stream, and we've held over 100 folks in here the whole entire time. So I'm gonna say let's go around the horn and let's finish this out. I'll go last. So anything you want to talk about, if you want to pimp your channel, if you want to talk about Rittenhouse, you want to talk about cold weather, or all of it for all that matter, it's on you. Let's start with the good Bruceinator. Go ahead, bud.
I'll hit both topics. Guys, I've said this before. I'm going to recap. If you want serious cold weather training, and I guarantee you're going to learn something. Unless you were in the military station and trained in cold weather training on a regular basis, you're going to pick up a whole lot from going to one of these classes. Absolutely get out there and do it. Brent will post the information below. I know that he will. I know some of you had questions, where do I contact to get involved in this? He'll post that information below. Absolutely get involved in that. Go to it. It's absolutely worth your money. You're going to come out of it feeling like you owe them something because you paid so little given the quality of training that you had. Secondly, in terms of Kyle Rittenhouse, hey, one of my first posts on Instagram was, hey, congratulations, Kyle. I can't believe he had to go through what he went through to simply have executed his rights and be vindicated in doing so. But this was not only a trial for a 17-year-old kid from Kenosha. This was a trial for all free Americans that practice the Second Amendment, believe in self-defense, and believe in defense of property. I'll leave it at that.
So I know I didn't have much to contribute on winter warfare. Again, my experience is lacking, but I will say that if that's something you're interested in, you always want that exposure to whatever it is. You have no experience in it. Get that exposure, even if it's just a little bit. In the future, it may serve you well. So the class these guys are talking about, I don't know that much about it, but it sounds like some good stuff, especially the price. That sounds really well, pretty good. But on the Kyle thing, I agree with Bruce 100%. This was an entire country on trial, at least half of the country that enjoys their rights and their privileges with being an American citizen. I'm glad the verdict went the way that it did. I think that there was a valuable lesson that the other side learned from this, and that's, don't poke the bear. When you poke the bear, shit happens, and it's not going to end up good. But I'll leave it at that.
Okay. I am not a conservative until it comes to the Bill of Rights. And then I become a raving tinfoil hat, foaming at the mouth conservative. It's my only place, and that's what I'm going to do. So the Second Amendment is not about duck hunting rights, and it's not about heirlooms that are handed down from generation to generation. That's not even a secondary consideration or a tertiary consideration. I admit it's a pleasantry. It's a pleasantry, hunting and sporting and heirlooms handed down from family generation to generation. It's a pleasantry side product of the Second Amendment. But that's not what the Second Amendment is about, never has been. It is about private citizens forming into militia groups. All right? That's what multiple recent court cases are on your side as the private citizen. That is certainly what the Rittenhouse trial was about. It was about about militias on trial. Could we still defend ourselves? Could we still form into private citizen militias? And clearly, this court case vindicated that and said, yes, those are still viable and they're still legal. So the last point there is, if you're going to do this, when we say a militia is uniformed, we don't merely mean the cloth, the uniforms and patches they wear. We don't merely mean a standardization of weaponry. What we really mean about uniformity, and what General Washington was referring to in uniformity, was specifically training. Go get training. There's so much training out there. I actually made a video on it. And come to One Shepherd. We're going to do your leadership training, right? Come to us. But that doesn't even happen until spring. So in between now and spring, in the many, many months, what do you got? 6, 7, 8 months there? You know what? There's a wonderful training program by S&S happening in Missouri. If you're anywhere close to it, it's worth your time. It's worth your dime. And that is the Winter Forge training. So start there.
Yeah, and to piggyback off of what Doc said, if you could show the slide, Brent, not just uniform with training, but uniform with, moral principles too. I think that's why I keep talking about morality. I keep bringing that up because at the end of the day, you have to maintain your principles as militia or as individual citizen, defense league, whatever, Justice League soldiers, whatever you want to call yourself. You have to have a leg to stand on, and you're not going to have it unless you consistently choose right over wrong behavior. And, there's another slide I have, if you could show that, Brent. We have right versus wrong behavior. Right is based in truth. It's in harmony with natural law, meaning it's not going to result in harm to other people without, self-defense principle being, part of that deal. And you have to consistently follow those rules if you want to have a leg to stand on. You're not going to have a peaceful society. Nothing you bring to this world is going to be good unless you start off on exercising your rights, studying it from a principle of choosing right over wrong. We see this consistently today. Whenever we choose to fudge the rules a little bit and choose wrong over right for the sake of the greater good or what have you, you eventually end up where you started. And I think we can see that today with a lot of the politics. Just the fact that we can't decide where our money's going in the government. I mean, just think of how much that money has been squandered and misused and turned into things that have enslaved us personally by taking our liberties and stuff like that. So you have to start with principles of choosing right over wrong if you ever want to achieve peace. And if you do that, if you maintain your principles, no matter what you face, you're always going to be in the right, no matter what the majority, no matter what the brainwashed majority believes in their mind. Truth is going to win out in that. So You know, not only should you guys be practicing and training, you should also be, you know, refining your principles, your moral principles, so that when you're dealing with these crazy situations on the street, when you're faced with mobs, you can choose right over wrong and firmly know that you performed a right over a wrong, that you are in the right when you do something. Because as Kyle found out, I mean, he's just bumbling through life kind of in that sense, like just defending himself. You know, he wasn't really thinking about these things. But you might have a situation where you have time to think about these things, you know? So like I said, at the end of the day, you guys really need to study up on the law, natural law and the laws of morality. Because if you don't, it's going to be the blind leading the blind. So that's why I always say that to you guys. And if you guys want to follow me, you just type in Miltech Moto on Instagram or YouTube. Hit me up on there if you want to chat. Instagram's the best way to reach me. That's about it.
All right, so I appreciate all the people we've had on. We've had some really stellar guys tonight. Both Cole and Tyler are just superb Army soldiers, combat veterans, I might add, of foreign wars, and they just really know their stuff. So I'm really grateful that those guys came on tonight. I noticed that the participation tonight's stream has been very good. It's been over 100 for the better part of the night, and it's just been awesome. Man, guys, I don't even know where to start. The cold weather training package, absolutely 100% fantastic training. God damn, the price is just ridiculous. If you guys are trying to pass that up, I mean, that is just unbelievable. I can tell you, Bruce can even vouch for this. Like, us going to that, it far exceeded our expectations, and it was just an amazing. Even if you're active duty or reserve military currently serving, like you should look to go in this, because we're gearing up for war, fellas. The next war could be with China. God forbid, it could be with Russia. Who knows? Who knows where the next war is going to be? We have the tendency of always preparing for the last fought war, right? We've been fighting in Iraq and Afghanistan, doing counterinsurgency operations. The next war could be against a pure threat. China, potentially Russia. I mean, who knows? Okay. We could find ourselves fighting in the mountains of Korea, defending South Korea against North Korea, and potentially with Chinese allies in these cold weather environments. Like, don't limit yourself to this picture perfect 70-degree, sunny, never raining environment training. Expand your horizon. Go out there, get that training. Okay. Going on and segueing into the Kyle Rittenhouse trial, 100%, that guy was 100% innocent. It should have never even gone to trial. The whole thing was politically motivated. It really bothers me. The other thing about that is the riots. I already commented about the rioting that took place last year. That stuff really, really, really gets on my nerves. I mean, it just takes me to a level of anger that I haven't experienced since Iraq and Afghanistan. The only way we're going to stop stuff like that is with good-hearted Americans, armed Americans, taking responsibility and protecting their businesses. Not just their businesses, but their businesses of their friends. All right? If you got people that own businesses, volunteer yourself like Kyle Rittenhouse. Go to those places and defend those places. All right? Because what's going to happen is good-hearted Americans, God forbid if it goes to trial, in a political trial like this poor young man got dragged through, good-hearted Americans are going to be on that jury, just like me and you. And we're not going to fucking say guilty. There's no way. So I hope that the only way we're going to save this country is to get good young men do not sit on the sidelines and act. And go and take that responsibility. Go and clean up those businesses, protect those businesses from these assholes that are just looking for an excuse to plunder, freaking Nike tennis shoes in the name of bullshit social justice causes. So that's all I got, guys. I've thoroughly enjoyed this live stream. I've thoroughly enjoyed drinking all the intoxicating beverages tonight. It's been fantastic. It's been a fantastic evening, fellas. And man, what a great time. Hold on one here. Let me get everybody up on the screen here. If I can figure this out. There we go. So
Amen. Amen, by the way.
It's been a good one, guys. We haven't gone 3 hours in a long time. So I appreciate everybody holding in there and hanging with the fight. My wife's staring at me. She's like, "You're drunk. What are you doing?" Jabbering to a bunch of people on the internet. So we're going to wrap this one up. Thanks again. God bless America. And the last thing I want to say, fellas, is I was watching the Fox Patriot Awards last night. And goddamn, they brought me to tears. They had the parents of a young man named Todd Beamer. Todd Beamer was the gentleman that was on Flight 93. And he was on a cell phone with his significant other talking to them just before they were about to make their final assault on the cockpit of Flight 93 to try to retake that plane. And his last words before they rushed that cockpit were, "Let's fucking roll." I threw in the fucking, but let's roll. Let that sink in. That's the American spirit right there.
That's an American.
That's an American. It's not a Democrat. It's not a Republican. It's not a conservative, liberal. That's an American. Let's roll. And a bunch of people that didn't even know each other before that day rushed that cockpit with goddamn fucking flight attendant's cart to try to retake that plane. And my hat's off. Those guys are heroes. And that plane crashed right in that open plane.
And no doubt saved people's lives. All 100%. The three other airplanes all hit their mark. There's no rational reason to believe that fourth airplane wasn't going to hit its mark, which was Congress.
Yep.
And so they did save lives. They didn't save their own.
That's
but
right.
damn if they didn't save hundreds of lives.
That's right.
And he even said before they launched that attack, that assault, we probably aren't going to make it. So my hat's to them. That is the American spirit, fellas. And we're going to end that on that. So thank you for tuning in. Let's roll.
Let's
Have
roll.
a good night.